Anybody that's been here before knows that I'm a stickler for starting on time. I want to welcome all of you here. I hope you understand that we had to limit the number of people because when the governor, we went back into the state of emergency through April the 29th, we were supposed to limit any kind of mass meetings to 50. I'm not sure that there are more than 50 now, but I'm not going to count them. But I do really appreciate your being here and your concern about Maury County schools. This meeting tonight, the work session, is for the board, of which we're not all here. Hopefully some will arrive. But hopefully this will be our first time to hear staff talk to us about the COVID plans, and that they can let us understand each step of it. It's our first time to hear from them. That is why public comment will be open next week. We won't vote on the plan. There may be some tweaking of the plan between now and then. We also know that schools, and I've been so impressed with the ones that I've gone to, and this mask keeps coming off my nose, I'm sorry. I've been so impressed that the schools are working hard to see how to make this work, and that their thoughts are about your children and about the staff as well, and as it is ours. That's our mission, is to put those 13,000 children that we serve first, and our staff as well. So with that being said, the first and only order of business in this work session is to hear from our new superintendent, Mr. Hickman.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening, board members. I first want to start off tonight telling you, just bragging on the central office folks. What incredible work they have been doing to put this plan together. We were told to put it together in a quick fashion. However, when we did that, we wanted to make sure that we were dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. You're going to learn some. Not only are you going to see this plan tonight, you're going to see some interesting facts that we found through surveys, and some just some good information to know. And we do ask questions. I do want to differentiate tonight. There are 3 plans that are happening, and I want to make sure that you and the public all know that we are trying to work together on 3 plans at the same time. The first plan is the CLP. That's the Continuous Learning Plan that the state says we have to have board approved and ready to go by July 24th. We have to enter it in by that day. The Continuous Learning Plan is basically the plan that's going to tell us how do we get 180 school days with a minimum of 6.5 hours per instructional days. The second plan that we're going to present to you tonight is our reopening. What is it going to look like for Maury County schools to open this year? Finally, the third plan, which you all have probably been asked to participate in, is the school procedural plans. And those are the plans that principals are working in hand with stakeholders to produce procedures that will keep staff and students as safe as possible. On all 3 of these plans, we have used many stakeholders all across the district, and for the CLP at the district level, as well as the opening plan, and finally with the principal's procedural plans for each school. I can't emphasize enough, if we come to a part you do not understand or you have a question, stop us and we'll be prepared to answer those questions. We're also going to attack this a little different tonight. The CLP plan is what we'll start with some HR information that I think you all need to know. Most of you probably already know it, but some of the regulations and guidelines have changed due to COVID, and we want to make sure we're very clear what those are and what the impact that could have on Maury County Public Schools. When we start digging into the CLP, we're going to have each section's leader come up and present. We tried to match up each section to the department. That way, if there's a question that we need to get into the weeds about that goes beyond the plan, you'll have the person up here on podium that is ready to respond and answer and can answer those quickly with the best answer. I do ask you and the public to please have patience and flexibility. The one thing that we've learned through this time is things are changing daily. To give you an example, we sat in a meeting with a state representative on a morning. By that afternoon, some of the information that he had told us had changed. We're finding that with some of the CDC guidelines, as well as the states, along with the numerous federal, state, and local policies. This is a time that we are all trying to navigate the best we can with the information that we have, and we're trying to stay current. With that said, I do want you to know that all three of these plans we'll consider an organic plan. What that plan looks like now may have to change due to federal guidelines or state guidelines. But with that said, we're keeping the esprit de corps, as you would, for each section alive. The objective is to keep students and staff as safe as we possibly can through this difficult time. At this time, we're going to start our presentation with Mr. Scott Lindsay, and he'll come up and he is going to introduce to you the regulations from ADA and FMLA.
Good evening, Board. I'm going to stay right here so I can work the PowerPoint. What I want to go over for you this evening are all the scenarios that are regarding leave that employees can take. There are new guidelines with Family Medical Leave Act that allow employees to take paid leave. And I want to go through the scenarios and how that may impact us going forward. I also want to dispel what we have heard internally in the building, that teachers are considered essential employees. Right now, that is not true. I checked with the state, I also checked with Tennessee School Board Association. Both have said that is not true. The board could elect to make a policy to make that so, and we're prepared to bring forth a policy for the board to consider if the board wishes to do that, but that is not true. Teachers are not considered essential employees at this point. Okay, what I want to go over are the Families First Coronavirus Response Act and what is called the Americans Disability Act interactive process and accommodations that employees could seek via that process. This involves paid sick leave for all employees, leave that will not come out of their personal sick leave or vacation time or any leave that they have earned, but it's a separate and apart leave. It also has Paid Family Medical Leave Act, and we're also going to talk about ADA requests for accommodation, which could lead to potentially employees working from home. Okay, the first three reasons that allow for 2 weeks of regular paid leave, that would be the employee is subject to a federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order related to COVID-19. Well, the governor's not done that yet. The more prevalent and more likely scenario would be the employee has been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine due to concerns related to COVID-19. So, for example, if an employee has been told that they may have COVID or they feel they have COVID and they're going to get tested, that's where this scenario would come about. And also the employee is experiencing symptoms from COVID-19 and is independently seeking medical diagnosis. The last three reasons allow for 2 weeks of 2/3 paid leave. The employee is caring for an individual who is subject to government quarantine isolation order or has been advised by a healthcare provider to quarantine or self-isolate. This could be a very small child. This could be a parent. If a parent is receiving any type of home health care and the home health care shuts down and is not providing services to the parent, this could be a scenario where that would come into play. Or if the employee's child care has been shut down because of COVID-19, this is where this would come into play. And the last bullet point is kind of unknown to us in the HR community. This is basically saying the employee is experiencing substantially similar condition as specified by the Secretary of Health and Human Services. That's if our federal government sees some symptom out there, and they're saying that everybody needs to quarantine because we're seeing a particular symptom. This allows the federal government to declare something specific as a reason that people would need to shelter in place or be quarantined. As you know, there are such things as the Family Medical Leave Act. The Family Medical Leave Act allows for 12 weeks of unpaid leave. That has now been changed to paid leave in these narrow circumstances. That's basically, as previously stated, an employee must have been employed with Maury County Public Schools for 30 days to be eligible for this. But this leave is also if you're having to take care of a small child, and if the healthcare center or the child care center they're going to shuts down, opens back up, shuts back down again. This allows for the employee to continually take off for up to 12 weeks. The biggest concern is the Americans with Disability Act. Employees with disabilities that put themselves at high risk for complications of the coronavirus would be eligible for this. The CDC just came out with a list of those diseases. I'm going to read them to you, literally a week ago. And here are those diseases. Chronic kidney disease, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, generally being viewed as immunocompromised, obesity, persons with a serious heart condition such as heart failure, coronary artery disease, sickle cell disease, type 2 diabetes, asthma, cystic fibrosis, hypertension, blood pressure, liver disease, neurological conditions such as dementia, pregnancy, pulmonary fibrosis, and other diseases that are lend themselves to making you immunocompromised. They also changed the guidelines about people 65, saying that 65 is the age of where they're viewing it, you should be concerned about coronavirus. It's now more open-ended, and it says aging, people who are an aging population. So it's not narrowed to 65 anymore, and as you know, you can consider what you want is aging. We also sent out last week a survey to teachers asking, and we had principals to send a survey asking teachers if you feel that you may access any one of these leaves. And as of Friday, I don't have the number here, it was 237. So we may potentially have 237 teachers that may feel they need to take some type of leave or another. The guidance we've also been given too is that if it's an Americans with Disability Act related leave, they could ask for the ability to work from home as an accommodation for leave. And we already have a virtual school, and so we're on record as having the ability for someone to be able to teach at home. So per the Americans with Disability Act and the EEOC that enforces the act, more than likely we would probably be obligated to provide the ability to work from home. So with 237 teachers that responded that they may, access any one of these leaves, that's a pretty interesting situation. We're also now surveying subs to see how many subs we have, that are going to be active. I don't have a number for that today, but I should probably have a number by the time we can reconvene, because as you know, if a teacher is out for these type of leaves, we'd have to have a sub. And if we don't have a sub, it puts us in a pretty difficult situation. So at this point, I'm finished with my presentation. If you have questions, I'd love to answer them.
I have questions, and maybe some of the others do as well. And I'm going to put on my teacher hat right now, because most of the teachers have been reaching out to me with questions, so I feel like asking questions on behalf of them. Let's go back. You have a classroom, child is diagnosed, or the teacher, or someone, a parent, teacher, students, class, they all go home, correct?
Well, the teacher, could access one of the leaves that I stated, and they could be off on a paid leave for up to 2 weeks. Now, internally, we've had discussions about, do students go home, and we're vetting that. I'd love for anyone, Mr. Gaines to
Well,
weigh
let
in.
me finish that. Okay, understand the 2 weeks, what happens is they come back and it happens again, and they need to be quarantined again? What happens?
Well, if they come back and they need to be quarantined, again, and they've exhausted, that leave, then at this point, they would be on their regular sick leave.
Okay,
And I emphasize at this point because laws and rules could change.
okay. Any of you all have a question? Mr. Moore?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Lindsay. I know this is kind of complicated. If I could go back to this, and to echo what Ms. Kinzer has said, the questions I've gotten from teachers, and this isn't the clearest documentation. I understand that there's a lot of legal terms here.
Yes.
Do you guys feel like internally, as we go back to school, that you can communicate these from the HR department to staff to explain exactly what teachers' options are, do you feel like you guys internally have a handle? I know it's hard to put it in writing because there's a lot of laws and, explanations that aren't very clear, but do you feel like internally you guys have a handle on this completely and can explain that at this point?
Yes,
Okay.
I do. I will send out, and I've done this when this law first came into play, an email that's kind of an easy read. I like to put in the Wikipedia link to the actual law so our employees can see the actual law for themselves, and just walk through scenarios with them in email so they'll have it. I wanted to make it as easy as possible because it is very complicated information. It's complicated to me, so I want to make it as easy as possible through some email communications to them.
That's good. Again, what I have heard over and over again from teachers is just they're confused. They don't know where to look for this information. This is all new stuff, even for people like yourself who are well-versed in HR. So I just want to make sure that staff can understand that what you're saying is that if they do have questions as we get back into this, anything at all, that they feel like they can call HR and get a clear answer and walk away from that phone call or that meeting and understand exactly where they stand.
Yes,
All right.
they'll be able to do that.
All right, thank you.
I forget about y'all sitting down there. I don't see lights, so we'll go on to the next.
Okay. Next, we'll have Interim Assistant Superintendent Scott Gaines.
Give us a chance to. We just have to change slides here. Just 1 second. So, good evening, Chairman, board members. We thought it pertinent to try to go through the reopening part of our as a part of the continuous learning plan, because we think going through this will help define some of the things that we may have to do in turn as we do the continuous learning plan. So we've shared, this information has been out. I know it's only been out about 3 days, and you've had a chance to look at some of the things that we have together with the documentation from the continuous learning plan. I have seen a whole lot of there's a whole lot of angst over how schools are reopening, and you know that. I saw on Saturday Secretary DeVos criticizing the superintendent of the Washington School District about, they're wanting to go back 2 days a week, and she was saying it's not enough. Just today Orange County is considering that masks aren't appropriate and that we may have a problem, that they're signing petitions about not even having masks and going, and not even doing social distancing. So there is a myriad of different opinions about how how we should return to school. So in doing this plan that you'll see, you'll see a number of things about the stakeholders and the involvement and how we tried to come up with the best solution that we thought for right now. And as Mr. Hickman has said to you to begin with, this is a fluid plan. You know, there will be if there are more cases and or if the if we get any kind of edict or change, we'll have to make some adjustments to the plan. With that, I'll continue forward. So we just wanted you to have a snapshot of where it exists right now. If you look at, these are our demographics. We looked at when you see those 800 students at heightened risk, that's based on from what our care plans and what we saw, that's an estimate of the students that could be affected by an illness from COVID. And then you see there are 1,800 employees with 405 approaching their golden years. So the next couple of slides just have people who participated in the meetings or we talked to or we got advice from, and we just want to say we're really thankful to all of those people who are involved and going to meetings. And I know when we had the health reopening team meeting, we plowed through a lot of hard stuff, and there are a lot of questions that still we're going to have more meetings as a health team to try to study and explore, especially with, those things that happen if a teacher does get exposed or if a student, that we'll have to do a lot more work with that so that, we're consistent and that we're doing the right thing that's within the guidelines. So, as you know, there's no playbook for reopening. There's a lot of things out there that are being developed, and we just wanted to highlight some of the places where we went, where we got some of our checklists, where we saw some school systems that had a good framework. We tried to use that information from them to try to help guide us in terms of, because there is no framework for this, and so we had to use some of the guidance that we had and then try to adapt it to our situation. You can see some of the stakeholder feedback. This was, you can see those dates there. I just want to highlight about the parent guardian survey with a 95% rate. So, as one of those survey things, and there's capturing the number of kids per grade, and when we add those up, we're close to over 10,000 families, or 10,000 students. So we think we're getting pretty close. Of course, we're still, have the survey out there trying to reach as many people as we can, encourage them to take that survey. And we'll continue to look at that survey information as we go. So based on some of that survey information, you can see some of our demographics there. Right now, about 66% of our folks surveyed say they are going to attend school traditional. They want to come back to school. And you can see there, about a third want to attend online. And then a very small percentage say they're not attending. And we looked at some of that. A lot of that is, like I said, they don't know the plan yet. And some are minor, hey, I'm going to another district. And then, of course, we looked at staff, the confidence index. We're going to continue to resurvey that confidence index because we think that's important to relook at that from maybe not quarterly, but maybe monthly to see how we're doing. Are we changing confidence? Or are the things we have in place making people feel safer or see that it's a safe environment? And, if you want to stop me at any time, I'm sorry, I was rolling on, but at any time, if you have questions, I'm happy to.
We'll let you get through it, and then we'll ask questions.
Or there are other people here who can also help and answer questions.
All right.
So, just more survey information, and we ask parents will they be sending students to school with a face covering, and you can see there that, it's about half and half. Some are maybe, we have a good portion that are saying yes, and then, we talked about, how many want to require masks, and you can see the survey information there, and also you see, the survey about optional masks. So the next thing we wanted to talk about that we want to propose, that we're talking about, that we're looking at, we were looking at different formulas and different methods that school districts across the nation and across our state were trying to decide. This is when we're going to change from, we're at a status where we go to all remote, or we go from a status from being all remote to being totally remote, and that way the schools were being closed to students. So we decided that we would look at the percent of active cases that, and that's not active school cases, that's just active cases in our county. So we based it on our county's population, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of 96,967, I believe. And so we took that, as you would say, from, if we ever got to more than 1% of active cases, then we would do remote learning for all students. I want to highlight at the point where we had medium cases. Of course, when we opened school, as we talked about, you're going to see some of the options where the choices are going to be in person or remote. We think the caseload continues. If we open and we're in person and partially remote, that at a point to where we get to that 482, that we would go back and offer to parents to go to remote if they wanted to at that point. We just think that would be another phase because some people, as we get more cases, they may seem that they want to go to remote. They might not want to send their kids to school because as it starts, once we offer remote learning, we're planning to redecide that every 9 weeks. But if the cases went way up and it was not at the end of the 9 weeks, we would make those adjustments. As I said, the plan is going to continue to be fluid as we go. So again, based on population in Maury County, looking at percent of active cases, I think as of today we would be low, and we would be normal operations with family choice for remote is where we would be right now. So looking at everything that we took into consideration, trying to do an A day, B day, trying to do an A week, B week, trying to do just a different choice of everything, and try to look at the impacts on instruction, of course, first, the impacts on transportation, the impacts on teacher methods and how we instruct, the teacher load, also looking at our food service, whether or not we'd be able to continue to feed children effectively, and of course looking at our caseload and where we are now. That the two options that we want to propose are that we would go traditional, which would be in person, and you'll see later on the PowerPoint about some of the mitigation strategies that are proposed that we would do in schools, that those things would as per the CDC guidelines, and then for those parents that didn't want to send their child to school, we would offer that remote instruction delivery. And of course you see the point there where at any point during the year we would be prepared to switch to remote learning. And you're gonna see later on in the continuous learning plan, based on where our devices are and what we know, how we plan to deliver that remote learning, you'll see that detailed out in the continuous learning plan. 'Cause as you know, we don't have, we're in the process, or you're gonna see when we do the special call meeting to present, we're gonna ask you to, let us order a lot of computers, and we hope that they'll come in, but we still won't have enough to go to 100% one-to-one. But I think we'll be able to talk to you about our plans to how we will continue that as we go along. So as you look at that in the traditional setting, you see some of the things that that we are the conditions, if you would, that we want to set for students. You can see those things like we're strongly requesting right now, not requiring that student staff wear masks in all locations. That meets with the current mandate right now, and that's where we are with that. If there's instances where social distancing is compromised, we will encourage students to wear masks, and we will try to follow the guidelines in classrooms as we can, and where that can't be, we will encourage students to wear masks. You can see there where we've got exemptions for some students. There are going to be some students who may not be able to wear masks, and we'll have to deal with those as we go along. You see we have the daily temperature checks, washing hands throughout the day, classrooms rearranged to promote social distancing, staggering class changes, no large assemblies, limiting visitors. All of our operations staff is here. If you have particular questions about some particular things like transportation operations or cafeteria operations, they're here, or visitor policies, they're all here to answer those questions. Limiting the sharing of resources, and then trying to spread students out as far as possible on buses. So we talked about those two choices. So they'll have the option to choose remote learning for any K through 12 child, or as you already know, we have a virtual academy in Maury County, and students in grades 7 through 12 have an opportunity to apply to that virtual academy. And that is you notice how we said choose K through 12, but if you go to the virtual academy, it's you have to apply, because there's a different process for determining students that can go to the virtual academy. So you're going to see that a bunch of times, those two options. So you look at traditional, 100% of students with health and safety operational changes to reduce the spread of COVID-19, and then the remote, having a plan to meet all students' needs if needed in a remote setting. And again, trying to, depending on the number of students that go remote, we will offer, I hope that we would be able to, if a student goes to Riverside and they want to go to remote, that remote learning would be offered by a Riverside teacher. But depending on how that plays out and how many students we want to be, that might be in remote, that might be different. But it will be a Maury County school teacher. So just a little more explanation of the virtual academy. You can see the highlights there that, you have the opportunity to sign up. It will begin in September. As the virtual academy is more for students who would be working on their own. They're going to get feedback from teachers, but they won't have there won't be like a schedule, if you would. They'll have courses they'll have to take, but they'll be taking those courses. They'll get feedback from teachers as to their progress, but it's not a set schedule. So if you look at the major differences between remote learning, which may be more regimented, that we might have classes for students in remote learning, the virtual academy is more on the students on their own. Not really on their own. They're going to get feedback from teachers. They're going to, if they're not logging in and making progress, a teacher's gonna be contacting them, our teacher's gonna be trying to, you know, get them in to counsel them to see what's going on, as to see as to why they're not making progress. So, in everything, we tried to look at, you know, the safe and healthy students, how we as a community can adhere to, you know, everything that goes on. As a community, how can we adhere to all the policies that we have to have? And then also input from stakeholders, as we want to hear, and we continue to hear from stakeholders. Just as for a moment, I know there's not public comment tonight, but we have posted a Google Questions doc that it's out on our Facebook page. You have access to those questions. What we intend to do is try to take those questions, and where we have a bunch of questions of the same thing, we'll create a frequently asked questions document that we can post out there, so we'll be able to better answer more specific questions. So this just talks a little bit about some of the operational things we're doing, and again, our operations staff is here if you have more questions about that. About the fresh air in the buses and buildings, Mr. Pinkston can talk more about, you know, the cleaning procedures on the buses, those things like that, our hand sanitizing stations, and there it is where he talked about the disinfecting the buildings, how we do that. And then having the adequate PPE available for students if they need it. So
Can I stop you there and
Yes.
this is another question, and I may go back later to ask some questions back behind, but when you're talking about having adequate sanitizing, so that was another concern that we all got in emails as to, am I gonna have to provide it? Teachers usually do provide things for their students in their classroom, but this is part of the money we'll get from the CARES Act to provide those.
Right.
Can
And
you-
we do operationally, we're already planning to purchase some additional things to be able to have adequate hand washing materials and those things like that. So is everybody else. I know that's what Eric would say. So we're trying to get all those things in and have those on hand for school. Where I think we already have over 1 million masks that will be available for students. Correct me if I'm wrong over there. I think the count was, Jonathan.
We've ordered 40 disposable masks per each student.
Right. So.
They are on their way.
Yeah. And thermometers are already on hand. We already have those things like that.
Well, that's just an obvious concern when sometimes you've had to buy supplies for your classroom, that we're going to provide that. They don't have to be concerned with that.
Right. Sure.
The point that I hope you heard him say, though, and it has to be emphasized, is we're one of how many counties in the United States are all asking for the same things. We have ordered a lot of these things. We have the cleaners, the hand sanitizers, and we're seeing them come in, but I just want you guys to understand that everybody in the United States are ordering these same things, not just schools. But we've been getting a pretty good return so far on everything.
Yeah, so far. We were talking today with Pat at EMA, and we were looking into procuring some shields. If you notice, you go into other county businesses, especially Mr. Allen's office, he has the, I like to call it spit guard, so to say. So we're looking to get those put in each one of the schools, but as Mr. Higgins said, it's a process of everybody's asking for that stuff. We looked into having the maintenance department build some for us, but order plexiglass has become an issue with everybody all across the nation. Orders that, but we are receiving. We do have the masks on the way. We have the thermometers already in the office, so it's coming in.
I apologize. So, in the end, as a part of this reopening plan, on item 2, we propose to you to delay the opening of school for 5 days to, and I think you saw that to give us a chance to mainly work with teachers to go over procedures, to practice those procedures, also to do some professional development with teachers on blended learning and some of the platforms that we need, some of the things that you'll see on the CARES Act purchases that are coming up in the next special call meeting to, that we gotta get those things in place and implement it. Yes, it's gonna be like a fire hose, but we're gonna continue to work with teachers to do the training, to provide, options for, extra help through our MAP academies, as we've always done. They'll probably be Zoom, or as we see the conditions, that's how we'll do them, but that's our intention, is to continue to offer follow-up. One of the things and we'll talk more about that when we get to the calendar, because we'll talk about that. And then you can see that finally, as we talk about those things that safe and healthy students, the safe, not only students but our employees and the community. Trying to base it on the level of community spread, what our caseload is, active cases, and that as things continually change, we will try to continually adapt to those changing conditions, and try to adjust our responses to how we act. Overall, we're just going to continue to try to provide a high quality education to students, in whatever manner we can. Okay.
Scott, can you go back to slide 12 and just let me make a comment on that one?
Is that the traditional
It was
settings?
a long list of things.
Okay. The traditional settings. Yes.
No. Well, it
Oh.
starts out returning to school.
Oh.
Traditional setting, yes. Two more.
Up or down?
Oh, sorry. Towards the beginning.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
That's it.
Right
That's
there.
it. Go to that. And the reason I stopped there is because as I was looking at that, I realized that in the meetings that I have been able to attend at the schools with their leadership staff, the principals, assistant principals, parents, these are the things that they addressed
Mm-hmm.
for their school.
Mm-hmm.
You can't apply the same thing to a large school and with lots of stairs and hallways to a school that may be small and has one floor. It's just
Right.
different. So my assurance to all of you all is that this checklist is being used at every school. So it's not one that we can say one size fits all. We can't. I mean, I'll do this. We just can't. And so when I saw that, I thought, well, that's really the things I've heard in these meetings. How do we respond? How do we limit visitors? Well, you just don't have them.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty easy, but at the same time, temperatures, how do you take it, elementary school, all of that's been addressed. You have to be assured about that, because I think that's the one thing that everybody wants, is to be able to educate your children, but we want to be able to do it safely. So I'm just looking at it and realizing that that's where the work is going on.
Mm-hmm.
After you all have done such a great job of putting this together, then it kind of ripples down.
Right.
And so I appreciate that. Anyone else? Mr. Moore?
Oh, Mr. Hickman, he can go ahead if he...
I want to make a comment about what you just said, so we can make sure it's clear and on record. That goes back to the third plan I talked about, was the school procedural plans, and we've given the principals to July 20th. We wanted to give them a couple weeks, so that way they could start talking to stakeholders and have those done. Hopefully the week of the 23rd, we'll be able to release those out to each school's parents, and the teachers should be hearing about them now. They shouldn't be hearing about it the week of the 23rd. And so for the teachers, if you feel like you don't have enough of that communicated to you, I would strongly encourage you to contact your school's principal. But what I'm hearing, that's not happening very much. Most of the teachers have been involved. So hopefully by the week of the 23rd, which that is not part of the CLP, we don't have to vote on that part, but hopefully we'll have all of those produced in a manual for you guys so you can see each school's plan.
Mr. Moore?
And if I could echo with that, I was able to sit in on several of those meetings with different schools, and frankly, there were aspects of those that obviously only the people that are in those buildings will be able to come up with. I know Marvin Wright would be an example. They happen to have 2 cafeterias. So their lunchroom eating and cafeteria plan can kind of look a little different than someone who may have 1 cafeteria where they're heavily loaded and they've got to look at the schedule. So I know that was kind of enlightening to me to see those differences, that there were some really good discussions taking place between staff, that they know those buildings, they know how to make those things work more efficiently than central office could ever try to push down to them. So I appreciate that you guys are really giving them the latitude to look out for what's best for those kids, the kids that they know that are in those buildings. So I guess 2 questions. One would be on a communication side. So I know there's portions of this. It's echoing. There's portions of this that I know we're going to be voting on a part of this. What do you guys foresee as the process for what it looks like if we, and I won't say if, when we have to make adjustments? Because I believe that we are going to come to times when we have to make adjustments. Do you guys foresee that coming back to the board? Do you see that as being an executive committee process? Or do you guys see that as just being central office making some pre-decided adjustments, but just communicating that out?
I would say it's going to be a combination of both. We're going to, there's going to be some decisions health-wise that we can't make, that we're going to have to defer to the health officials and say, what are our options and what should we do? Others, I think, like y'all talked about with principals, there's some things that are coming back to us to say, hey, we need a universal what we're going to do on this, and that's, part of us that we've got to go back and work and say, okay, here's the what's going to be the same. An easy one is the visitor policy. Sure. That's an easy one that we can say, hey, it's consistent across, everybody's going to do the same thing. Others that are harder are going to be, things like dismissal and things like that. We just can't dictate. They're going to have to do that, but we're probably going to have some discussions about extra duty, those things like that, because it will be different. Okay. It will be different as more parents probably may drive their children to school versus riding a bus, and that will cause us to have longer car rider lines and those things like that.
So I guess my question, I'm going to put on my parent hat for just a minute, and I guess understanding that there may be different approaches, mm-hmm. How are we planning to communicate that? And I mean both from a district level and from a school level. Again, as a parent with a child in middle school, I want to be assured that if there are changes in how the operations are going at that school, that is very quickly and very clearly communicated out. Do you guys, or are you planning to put processes in place for that? Because again, that's, I just want to know that there's something in place for that, because as a parent, these things happen fast. I would like to know that if the all-call is the preferred motion, preferred communication method, that's what I should be looking for as a parent. Okay. And the same thing on the district level. If there's some format that you guys are planning to kind of lean towards, I think it would be nice as a parent to know what that is so that I can be looking for that information there.
Okay.
We're going to bring up Jack Cobb. He is actually over the communications part of the plan, so we'll let him kind of tell you what his plan is when things do change.
Hey, David. The plan is to continue to use what we've been doing with School Messenger, which is the all calls, the all emails, the all texts. Also, using social media. It seems to be a great way to communicate, and our website. Did you have any other ideas?
No ideas. I know one of the, and I'm part of this is just me relaying questions I've gotten from various teachers and parents. I know some people say, hey, I don't use Facebook.
Right.
I see a lot of people say they don't use that. I know it seems like everybody's on it, but not everyone is. And I just want to make sure we are capturing communications with people that are not doing that. I know I rely heavily personally on the phone calls. Mm-hmm. They're really lengthy to listen to at times, but I understand that there's information we need in there. So I just would hope that I know we have a lot of platforms. I just want to make sure people understand maybe what the best source is, if we can be clear about what that is, or make sure, if not, that we're hitting the exact same information across all of them.
Well, let me tell you that Facebook is a page, and it does not require an account to view the page. So one can look at our Facebook page without actually logging in.
Okay.
And, of course, we'll utilize the website and the all-call system, all email, and all text.
Also, for school level, as you know, we've got the parent portal. We can also put those announcements out there along with, as students log in to look at those assignments, we can also put announcements there. I agree with you. We want to be consistent with our message across every platform, and I guess, like you're saying, having all those platforms, but if there are other methods that we need to communicate, we certainly will want to encompass those in and try to, try to reach everybody's mode for communication, because we do want to be across all modes consistent with notifying parents if there's a change, and so that schools all do it the same way and we're all operating in that same manner.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I know one of the things that I've tried to encourage parents to do is to reach out to their principals, and if they're not using one of those platforms, maybe they've decided they just don't do any of those platforms, definitely reach out to your principal and make sure that they know where you are, so they can make sure they get information to you, because everybody does deserve to have the information so that because there's a lot of variables and there's a lot of last minute things, and I understand that, and I know, again, as a parent, it's a little confusing. Car rider line may look different. The bus routes may look different. We just need to make sure that we're trying as best as we can as a district to reach that out to everybody, even if they're may not be on the traditional platforms of how we communicate.
Mr. Howell?
So I have a question about, well, I have a couple different questions. One of them is about fixtures. So I know that there's at least one school, I'm sure there's many more, that is asking for additional cafeteria tables, because they have a big enough space to accommodate, but they don't have enough tables. I'm sure there's requests for other things I don't know about, but that's the one that I do know about. Do we have any money anywhere for, or do we have some in a warehouse somewhere, extra things? I don't think we do.
We'll have to check the storage to see what we have there.
I can tell you on a food service side, right now, we just took at least $100,000 or $700,000 hit from this COVID shutdown, to try to purchase additional stuff versus the things that we stopped going forward with would be a challenge for us. So, finding more tables, it would be, I mean, we're talking a couple $1,000 or $2,000 per table at least. So that's, of course I do hear, there's possible funds out there that may be able to pull, but from a food service budget standpoint, it would be tough.
At a meeting I was today, they had a discussion about tables, because they do have a room they could spread out that table. Teachers have tables in their rooms, and now they're going to need more room to social distance. So the teachers came up with the idea that some of us donate those tables during this time, so that they could be used for that. So that's a school-wide discussion, I think.
Yeah, that'd be more of a principal site-based,
Yes.
I would assume, to make that decision of finding those locations to bring in, to build out. And that's where we're just more on a food service side, since I'm up here, we're looking more at the menu and ways to bring kids in and out to get them their food efficiently. So that's our goal, and letting the principal making that decision of how that can occur. So we're in pretty much a partnership. So, and that's going to be, well, coming up here in the next couple of days, we'll have that conversation in a little more depth.
I had more, yeah, but go ahead.
If it'll stay on, I just wanted to comment that also, as we, we have money like for additional janitorial supplies, those things like that. Some of those things we're able to apply for FEMA reimbursements or so we will look at that as we, if we're able to get something from the state or the federal government in a reimbursement, that'll free up money that maybe perhaps we can do a budget amendment and do some things like that. But of course, we won't be able to do that at the beginning of school, but there would be some options where we could, have those things and be ready to try to take care of those things as they come along.
Okay. Another concern that I have is, what about our students with IEPs? Of course, if they're in a traditional setting, that would be something that would be easy to accommodate. But what if they're in a non-traditional setting? What if they're in a remote or a virtual learning setting? How would that apply? I knew where she was.
Sorry, I'm in the cheap seats. So, as you are all very well versed, the I in IEP stands for individual. So all of those are individual decisions that we will have to come together as a team. Parents are always on the team and always invited to make sure that we are meeting all of those services. Now, obviously, when a parent, if a parent would choose a remote option or a virtual option, you know, we're going to come to the table and there's going to be limits on what we can offer. There's limits in the school building on what we could offer, but they may have to be more condensed or look a little different. You know, we of course have the situation of, are we willing to send teachers into homes to provide services? Are parents willing to have us in their home after they've been to 5 other homes that day? So all of those will be individualized decisions that we will sit down with families. We've been sitting down with families all summer and we'll continue to sit down with families, whether it's a Zoom meeting or whether we meet in my office and everybody just sits at opposite sides of the room. Was that, I only heard part of your question, so was that specific
That was
enough?
good, that was good,
Okay.
yes, thank you.
Mr. Fulbright.
Thank you. Mr. Cobb, just a quick point. Those all calls are very effective until you start getting 4 and 5 a day. So that predated you, but just wanted to throw that out there for you. Thank you guys and ladies for putting the plan together. This was very thorough, well thought out. A couple questions that I had just after hearing you talk. How were the stakeholders selected for this plan? Just, you don't have to go into great detail, I'm just curious.
Are you speaking for the district level or the school levels?
District level.
The district levels, what we did with each section was we tried to match community leaders and to that section. And we tried to hear the voices of most of the different peoples in the community. And the big one was we tried to match that section to
Do you feel
that
like you
community.
did have a good representation of all segments of the county?
I think so, but I also want to make it clear too that we're not done. We're still going to be calling in people to look at it as well. But I feel that I think we did a good job to get a snapshot and make sure that we called in, we called in people purposefully to make sure we were getting a good idea of an overall consensus through the community.
Okay, thank you. Where are you finding the active cases? How many active cases are there today in Murray County?
231. We are using, honestly, where I keep up with it is the City of Columbia is releasing that every day.
Okay, so
And you
I've
can-
been looking for it and I couldn't find
You
it.
can find that on Facebook, I think on there, and, yeah, tn.gov.
Okay, I saw the total cases, I
Yeah,
just didn't see
TN.gov does
the running
total.
active.
Yeah, the mayor's page, and I went to the tn.gov and all I saw was the active.
Yeah, that's
So
all I've been
the
finding.
mayor's page
Okay.
and the city's page.
Okay, great. How does, if a family were to choose the remote learning option, how does that impact, or does that affect in any way, the collegiate academy that we have at Central, or any kind of advanced placement credits or dual learning credits,
And
anything like that?
We're kind of jumping ahead of ourselves because we're going to cover these things in the plan, but we
Okay.
can go ahead and answer that now, or we can wait till we get to that part of the plan.
Just answer it whenever you get to it later
Okay.
on, that's fine.
So,
And this may also fall into that category, but, is there a time commitment for the remote learning choice?
yes, what we're looking at is being new, we're looking at giving them a grace period to opt out when we first start. They may start and say, this just isn't going to be the best fit. So they'll have an opportunity to opt out, but that's going to be a window. Then once that starts, we're looking at a quarter, 9-week
Okay.
commitment,
Quarter.
because we've got to be careful of having kids going back and forth with our BEP balance for the classrooms. We don't want to have a teacher, for example, having 22 kids, and then all of a sudden we have a rush back in, and now they're at 35.
Right. Okay, my last question is, why was the decision made to only go with 1 week of a delay as opposed to more than that? Because I have a feeling we're asking an awful lot of our teachers, and maybe Ms.
We-
Ink could nod her head or shake her head. A week is, seems like packing a lot into 1 week when we're talking about revamping everything. And then you're talking about classroom setup too.
What-
That's the issue that I heard more.
Right, and where we got a week from is honestly from the surveys and from listening to you guys at previous board meetings, was to get it started as soon as we could. And so we looking at reality, could we use more time? Absolutely, but can we get it done in a week? Absolutely, we feel we can get it done in a week. And when we get to that part of the plan, to the calendar part, we've been very specific on what's gonna happen those days. And I'll just go ahead and, I'm sure you guys have seen it already, like part of one of those days is gonna be just practicing. They need to practice these procedures so we can shoot holes in them before the kids enter the building. It may not be what's safest for employees to do it that way, and they may have to say, we need to back up and relook at that procedure and come up with a better one. So we have proper plans for those each day. It's not just throwing it out there, do what you want. We are specific on what has to be accomplished, and we're gonna be flooding the schools and going out just in case they have deeper questions they need to ask from districts, so they'll have somebody on hand from there on those days to help.
Okay, thank you very much. That was very informative.
Ms. Hopkins?
I think Nathan.
Go ahead, that's fine, go ahead.
Thank you to everybody for being here. We appreciate all the emails. Our brains are, we can't, but we're gonna do our best. But one of our, my concerns is, as well as come with the email, is that, the hybrid learning or the digital learning, how to make sure that we are prepared for all children to be educated and, for that to be, because we're talking about the iPads, some children, some families that they don't have them. And if we are going to, say we're gonna educate all the children, we have to make sure some kind of way that all of them can be, properly educated. Because if we have to go all remote, because of something that happens, we have to make sure, that's able to be done. If not, and 80% of kids can have those resources and do what they need to do, but then 20% cannot, we're looking at a catastrophic level of children that will be falling behind and won't have their, the proper learning. So that's my concern with, if we have to go that route, what do we do and how are we gonna handle that? I think something's coming down with that. We're kind of discussing, ensuring the iPad technology, ensuring that the remote learning can occur. Because the truth of the matter is, we've never been here before, but all homes aren't conducive to learning, in that kind of way. So I just want to make sure we are able to fine-tune that, and that all children, all of them, no matter what area of the school or what have it, we make sure all the children have the tools and the resources and the backing they need so they can be successful, safe, and successful.
Mr. Atkinson?
I just
I'm
want
sorry.
to, I think you'll see in our, continuous learning plan, our option for K-4 right now will be, paper packets in those materials, just because, we don't have the device count to deliver all the way one-to-one, all the way down to kindergarten. So, that way we will ensure that, those teachers, they have those work packets and those things that we'll be able to work with and do that interaction. That's our, remote learning part for K-4 right now. That's one of the things we debated a long time about what we could, how could we do, we really want, you really want K-4 to come to school, but that's a population that people are most worried about. How we can keep them if we need to keep them in mass or keep them socially distant and those things like that. Ultimately, we know the best way to teach children is, with a teacher, and so we really, had some angst about how that's going to work. And of course, we do have a plan as we continue to get opportunities for grants and additional things that are out there, we will try to pour that money into technology so we can continue to buy more devices so we can get to that one-to-one. But we're really thinking about that in terms of how we do that in K-3 before we just arbitrarily say everybody's on a device.
Thank you. Mr. Atkinson?
Sort of go along with her question too, which I got a couple questions. If we do go to remote learning, what is our percentage right now, or will be at the beginning of the school years, to cover the remote learning capabilities, as far as computer percentages and be able to cover all that? Just kind of want to know where we stand at right now.
So that also falls into the COP. I was going to explain that later, but I'll do it now.
Okay, I figured it was, I'm sorry.
It's fine, it's fine. So based off the current numbers we have on the survey back, which is well over 6,000 households that's now responded, 77% say they have a device already.
Okay.
I was leaning on telling you all that just because of how much we're going to spend on devices, but ideally, and I'll give some more details on that, it just incorporates a lot of the software that we use and stuff on the devices, hence why we want to be able to provide those. But per that survey, only 4.7%, which is about 200 households, say they'd have no internet access at all. So, I mean, we've heard different numbers that say, 23 or 35, or if you go look at the FCC's website, it says that 97% of our county has access to internet. So we know how that works with the FCC, but based off the survey alone, 4.7. So, of those 233 responses that say they have no internet access, that could mean the possibility of, just no cell service at all. We know we have those locations. But if there is any that actually may have some cell service capability, we've got some money set back under the CARES Act to purchase anywhere between 200 and 235 hotspots currently through our state contract to provide that if that's available. That goes back to being a one-to-one situation a one-on-one situation where we might have to provide, I guess, some alternative learnings for those that don't have internet access. Or we've even talked about, again, fluid plans, still adding to it, maybe a 2-week, set up 2 weeks worth of content. They come to a location, download that content, download those videos or whatever, and then go home and can do it remotely or at home with no internet access. So that's been an option talked about as well.
You answered my second part on that, on
Okay.
the remote areas of Maury County, getting access to internet.
And we've been working on a document that shows all the different options for even low income, how you can get internet for $5, for example, a month. So we've got a document that's going to be pushed out soon that includes those as well, if you want to be able to get your own internet. So that's just kind of covers that.
My last question is, we're looking at the 1% of COVID per county. Have you looked at, I'm sure you have, but have you looked at the 1% per school, shutting a school down versus the whole county, or?
That goes back to what Mr. Gaines was saying. We're going to have to look at schools kind of isolated, and we're still talking to Murray Regional and the Health Department and trying to fit what those scenarios mean, because we keep getting, there's a core of information we get, and it hasn't changed at all, but there's some things that have changed, and one of the big things is the contact. What does that mean, and when do we shut down a class? When do we shut down a school? And that's been kind of a slippery slope when we've been trying to investigate what that means. We were told by the State Department that we need to make sure that we're trying our best not to close down districts and schools. However, they said, there's going to be emergency situations where we'll have to close down the districts and schools. And then I guess I can go ahead and put this kind of out there too. We've also learned, at least through August, as long as the Governor's Emergency Act is still in place, the governor is least likely to close anything down because he's given all authority to our county mayor to do that now. So I do want to be clear about that. Now that is over when this August Emergency Act ends. If he extends it, and still extends it to where, you know, the mayor has that authority, it's really gonna go into his power. But right now, we want to be crystal clear, as Mr. Gaines said, before we start throwing things out there, because it has changed so much just within a classroom, what they first told us to now what it is. So, I hate to kind of be slippery about that question, but, we're still trying to learn too.
You're not being slippery about it. Nobody can predict what is gonna happen. Nobody can predict it. They may throw some numbers out there, but it's just numbers being thrown out there. Nobody can actually predict
It's
what's gonna
just
happen.
changing, and I feel like, and this is Michael Hickman personal opinion, but I feel like as school starts, the schools across the country start opening, we're gonna see things change drastically. I think we'll start seeing, going one way or the other, but we think we'll probably start seeing some of these states and some of the CDC and et cetera, changing some things on us. And Mr. Gaines, would you, anything to add on that?
I was just going to add, I mean, we will act accordingly. If we sense that there's a hot spot in a school, we're gonna close that school. But if that school's in a location that, you know, perhaps we can only close that school, then that's what we'll try to deal with that as we come to it. And that's, like you said, some of the things that, you know, maybe that might be an emergency meeting rather than or executive decision rather than trying to get a special call meeting and do something like that. There may be some things that, as we think about it, that we need to establish some kind of protocol to say, hey, here's what will happen. Staff, y'all have the authority to do this, but if it's gonna be more than this, we at least need to be aware, or how do we talk about that, you know?
Mr. Moore?
Okay, thank you very much. Let me go backwards to a couple of different questions here. Actually, I've got, my list kept getting longer. The virtual academy, that it's the ages 7 through 12. Just to clarify again, those are primarily for students that, in that household, they feel like can be more self-led, not self-taught, but self-led, that they can operate a little more independently. And that is gonna vary by child, obviously. I have children that could do that and others that couldn't, so, I would encourage definitely that for any parent that's considering those, to be very mindful of what your child's capable of. The question I had about that too was, it starts in September, was tentatively starting in September. What does that mean for a parent? Let's just say I'm a parent and I'm considering that option for one of my children right now. Do I just not send them to school? Do I go ahead and, are you guys gonna have a registration process where that starts for September? Because I have a feeling there's gonna be, you know, parents asking that exact same question. What needs to happen? And that doesn't have to be answered right now, but I have a feeling that question is absolutely going to be asked by another parent at some point.
I think there's a little confusion there.
Okay.
Applications are taken up through Labor Day,
Okay.
so we can go ahead and start kids. We just don't want to wait till end of September, October, when you're about to have a break before you enter kids in, because they have to have
Okay.
the time to work.
All right.
So we'll be accepting those applications. I think that was a typo there, that it would
Okay.
start, applications would be accepted until,
Okay.
if
Good.
that
So we
makes sense.
definitely may, when that comes out for the next week, that we clarify that and
Yes.
then offer some additional information. Okay, that helps. Thank you. Another question I had, sorry, I've got several, Betty. I apologize. As one of the board members who did make comments about the delay of school at one of the previous meetings, I know one of the concerns I had at that time was doing non-targeted training that was just kind of throwing random training at teachers and doing that. Now, what I'll say is this: I feel much better about a 1-week delay, hearing what you guys have planned, that you guys really have a strategy for how to use that. So I will ask, kind of, I guess, go a little further than what Mr. Fulbright did. I heard you guys say you would like more time. If the board had not made comments about how long they needed, realistically, to do what is being planned right now, how much time would you guys like to have for that?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, we have to also consider, you know, where does that 200 days fit into in that school day, and how much can we push it into, looking at the calendar that's already out there, and how we would change it if we were to try to, say, go another go to the end of August, we would have to look at where are we gonna put those school days. And, we just realized more time would certainly be more time for training teachers, more time for, planning for options for parents. If they say we want remote, we can get better and better at that. More time to get devices in, so we know exactly, hey, this is how many devices we have, and getting all that, once parents know, getting the device to the kid and all those things like that.
I appreciate that. So I guess
we threw out, yeah.
to clarify where I'm
yeah.
coming from on that, as a board member, I feel more comfortable if you guys can say, we need exactly 17 days to do what our plan says. I can start to understand why you're asking for that, and even though I may not like it personally, I can understand it, and I can start to get on board with that. And I guess that's the direction I'm going. So if you guys are saying that you need 2 weeks, or you need 3 weeks, and here's why you need 3 weeks, I'm speaking for myself, but I think other board members may actually be able to understand what exactly you're asking for. What I had a problem with initially was, hey, we just need 2 weeks. And there was no explanation, there was no real plan in place. It starts to be hard to buy into that. But I understand. So far, I feel like there seems to be a strategy for what to do with this week. But if you need more time, I would like to hear that.
What we can do, we'll explore it this week as part of our questions going back to, and we'll bring that back to you guys the 20th or before. How would y'all like for us to approach that? Because, we just felt at this time that 1 week, because we were asking a lot, so we never, how would y'all like to approach it from here?
I guess I want us back one step up. How much input did the teachers have on this 1 week decision? And do you have a way to gauge if the teachers are comfortable with the 5 day, essentially it's 5 days, that delay, or do they feel like, is that something that's come through on any of the surveys? Is that?
We have not asked, in a survey for all teachers, that part, but part of the stakeholder groups, we were asking for 1 week, would this be enough time to do these things?
I think the teachers would be the ultimate stakeholder in that conversation.
Well, absolutely. We used, like I said, it was just the ones in the part of the stakeholder groups we were in.
That's what I want that input.
But we can most certainly make that part of a survey to go out this week.
My good friend, Mr. Moore.
Ms. Inc. is back there shuffling. Do you have an answer?
I'm not shuffling really. We just received the survey with the plan on Friday. I don't think all teachers have had time to vote, to digest the plan in fairness, so I wouldn't expect input from teachers right this minute. What I would say is look at our contracts and what our contracts, if you're talking about extending the beginning of the year 20 days, we have a certain number of contractual days, just for all employees, in fairness, then you might be talking funding and other sources of funding for those, which is some of the concerns that teachers already have, is if in plans there's extra time, then where is that funding coming from, and are you expecting us to work 17 days later than our contract says?
Right. And it goes back to what Mr. Gaines was saying about, we've got to be careful where we take those days and put those. And I would like to add a layer. If we're going to go ahead and we have no problem, we can go ahead and start putting out a survey to the teachers, but I feel like we should put out one to the parents as well on asking that.
I mean, again, I wasn't asking to alter that. I was simply asking, if you guys are saying there was a whole lot of heads nodding, saying that they could use more time, as a board member, it's information that would be nice to have.
We just knew that we couldn't start on the August 3rd date.
And that's a reasonable
There was just
thing.
no way we could do that and feel that we could adequately have the teachers trained on the things we need to do, because there's another level to it. When we start talking about remote, we've got to train teachers, one of the platforms that we're going to use, but one of the things we're going to be asking teachers is make sure we're teaching the students how to use these platforms, so if we go on remote, that the students will know how to use the platforms and not go home and parents are scratching their heads and kids are scratching their heads. And we're also wanting to release videos to parents to show them how to use the platforms as well, so we can make sure everybody knows what we're doing in case we have to go to a remote situation for that school or district. So, we're at, your will. If you want us to do that, we can go ahead and get a survey out. I don't think is part of the CLP, is it? So, the calendar is not the part that we have to put in there and have voted on by the 20th. So that's something we can still discuss and not have ironed out, if that's what, that's the will of the board.
I've got 2 more things, I'll wrap them up, I promise I'll hurry. One thing I know, and it was brought up earlier about the remote learning, a concern I have is, are we doing, with the understanding that at this point, when we talk about remote learning, we're really talking about individualized plans for each student. I mean, based on, do they have internet access? How are they operating under that? One of the concerns I have, knowing that we already have some areas we struggle in, let's just say we get 9 weeks into this with a student A here. Are we tracking to see if student A is performing below how they did last year? Are we going to have a process in place for, if we see that, finding some other solution to address that? Because that's a concern I have, is that people come in, we're already, again, we came off of a truncated year last year. People, we're going to have some regression issues. I think everyone understands that. I'm worried that we have a family that is concerned about being in the school setting. They choose a remote option. They get 9 weeks in, and are we tracking to see if they're doing as well as they can?
One of the things about the remote learning is we have district-wide pacing guides that have been updated. And the key to this, and this is what I've told the staff and the principals, is the key for this to work is everybody first has to stay with the pacing guide, regardless if you're remote or if you are traditional. We have to make sure all students, regardless which route they take, they're there. Because they will be, we do have assessments. The state are coming up with some of the benchmark assessments that we need, that will be able to tell where kids are at and where they need to go. And it is my hope that, well, not my hope, one of the things that we've talked about that we're going to try to make a lot of clarity about is when kids start back either remote or traditional, we need to know where they're at, because we know there was a loss of learning last year. The state has also came in and they have talked a little bit about this to us as well, and we can talk about that in a minute, but I want to go back to the first point of we're going to be tracking students along the way, and we're going to be benchmarking to make sure they're where they need to be. And I think some people are getting confused, and we're going to talk about it here in a second in that part of the plan. People are getting remote confused with the remote that they lived with in April and May, and it is not the same remote plan. It's a totally different remote plan. And the state has came down and kind of told us, and it gets into attendance, what is attendance for remote, and we've got a section on that. We're going to, Mr. Lang will be talking about that. So when we start talking about that, they're going to be getting teacher time, okay? And so we'll talk more about that part. So I want to just assure you that we will be benchmarking. They will be on the same learning time space as a traditional.
Okay. 'Cause I imagine, again, as a parent, I can see where people would be concerned that a child just gets sent to home to learn at home, and they get lost in the shuffle of this. And I just want to make sure that we're not going to let that happen.
And when Mr. Lane gets to his part, when he tells you what attendance is, it kind of covers that, because the commissioner has told us what attendance means. And like I said, I think people just keep going back to April and May, what remote was, and I'm telling it is not the same. That was kind of just give kids something to keep them engaged in their learning, but now they're saying you got to keep them moving forward in their learning.
All right, thank you. One last question, and I promise this is the last one, and you can stay up there for this one. The active cases metric that you guys have chosen, I know Williamson County has chosen to do something similar to that. Do you guys feel like that is the best metric for closing the district or schools?
There are several metrics out there that you can use, and we have, speaking with different people, different districts, the state folks, and actually the guy that came in that day to talk to us, they're not trying to point us into one metric or another. We just thought that one would fit better because we get a more actual up-to-date. Some of the other metrics, there's a week or 2 week lag in them, where the active cases is telling us right now what's going on. So we wanted to get one that would fit where, you know, once we get the information, and if it's a week old or 2 weeks old, you know, we need to know that earlier.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Beaver.
Thank you, ma'am. So, one of the things that I've got a question about is transportation. And, how do we see it working or evolving or whatever it's gonna be?
As he makes his way up here, I will say transportation is probably one of the most difficult pieces of the puzzle. It really is, and it's hard to get. I'll just let him come up and start speaking.
Madam Chairman, Board, I'm Garth Pinkston, Transportation Supervisor. Been in there since November, so I've not had a typical year. So this is pretty unusual. Most of the bus drivers are 60 and older, about 2/3. So I have a great concern for the safety of our kids. That's objective number one. And we try to get them from home to school and from school to home as safely as possible. And we've kicked around a lot of things with our bus drivers. One of those is this thing right here called a mask. And most of our bus drivers coming to visit us are visiting in masks. I have had one bus driver that did have COVID. And that's my concern as we move forward. My other concern is, as of Friday, I had 2 bus drivers retire, and I now have 0 substitutes. So, if we had several drivers with COVID that would be out for a period of time, it's going to be very hard on us. We have 5 people, including myself, that can drive a bus and do drive a bus as far as substitutes. We do have 4 part-time substitutes. We've asked them if they wanted to become full-time, and not right now because they have other jobs. So that is critical with this situation. Now, more specifically, to answer your question, we have looked at our routes. 25 to 40%. We had a supervisors meeting of the Middle Tennessee bus drivers. 25 to 40% of the parents indicated on their surveys that they would be probably car riders, at least at the start. That does make it difficult for us because that's a fluid thing that as the COVID goes down, which we're all hopeful it does, then our bus ridership is going to go up. I'm requesting from our router that we look that first week to make sure that we only have maximum 2 to a seat. We have 149 buses that travel 11,000 miles every day, 199 staff, and so we just can't separate on buses like we would like to. Now, we're going to try to leave the seat behind the bus driver vacant because of, the fear of COVID. But also, that will be used as a seat if a student indicates that they are not feeling well or is coughing a lot and sitting next to a student. We're going to want to move them to that vacant seat until they get to school, and the bus monitor there then can take them in and check them out. So, that's some of our procedure. Our drivers, when they come to work, we have a health checklist that they're going to go down through. 2 things: if they cannot taste or smell, that's a real indicator of COVID. We will check their temperature at that point. If they have an elevated temperature, they will go home. They will not be driving that day. So my concern is, what are we going to do when we don't have subs and we don't have enough drivers? Well, Mr. Perriman may have to be driving a bus too, but I need to be free in case there is an accident to be able to go to that site, or Mr. Perriman does. So that's a concern that I have, and that's another issue I don't want to bring up at this time. But did I answer your question?
Yes, sir, I think so.
Okay.
Got got one more question. And it probably affects you.
Okay.
But, at what stage would you take the student's temperature? When they get on the bus? Or when they get to school?
We've discussed that, and see, I've got stops, like Countryside Village at 45 kids get on. We would have to have additional person to check their temperature, but as they're checking temperature, you're getting a half mile of cars behind them. So it's really not feasible at that point. We would, and that's in my parent letter, to have the parents check their temperature and observe their child before they get on the bus. But then once they get to school, I've talked to a couple principals about routing the buses and the car riders. Many of the elementary are going to check their temperatures as they come in the building.
I think all of the schools are going to do that. I think that's a protocol at all.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, we're gonna get into now the CLP. Now, this is the part from the beginning to the end is that we have to vote on by a board and be in agreement, and then we will send it off to the, state on July 24th. Did you guys wanna take a break before we get into this? Madam Chairman? Okay. This goes, let me just go ahead and tell you that the CLP part is pretty quickly. It goes quickly, and unless you have a lot of questions, which might be one or two parts you may have a lot of questions about, but some of it is pretty cut and dry, like the first part through first and second part is when we get into some of the other ones. So, who is...
I think that if any board member needs to take a break, they can do it, but I would rather go ahead.
All right, so Mr. Gaines will start with our section 1.
Good evening again. We were just laughing. I misspelled my own name. So, luckily, we have time to change that before we get to it.
So this is a working document.
It definitely. So the first part just talks about our describing our landscape, and we chose to use the same landscape that we talked about from when we did the CARES Act. That, you know, as we closed schools last year, we faced, you know, 3 major issues. We didn't have enough devices. We didn't have sufficient teacher training to be able to go remote, and then student teacher training, and then the lack of assessments. So in this plan, we're trying to address all of those things is what we're looking at to be able to address what will happen in the event that we have to close, and hopefully that this will blend into that any time schools are closed, that we will never stop learning, that students will know where they need to go, they'll be able to still complete their assignments. If, students are able to, there's a difference between going to a platform and completing some lessons to say they met the time requirement, but that may be good in the event of an emergency. If we had to stay at home, but students, were able to have internet access, if we taught them that they were able to log into the platforms and do that, we might could get credit for that day. Eventually we would get there, but ultimately we would have lessons already there. Students would be able to access those. Teachers would continue to learn, continue to teach, and we would continue to do that. So from there, we'll talk about the first part of it. What we decided to do is each supervisor has a different role in that, so we're just going to call them up to talk briefly about their section, and you'll have the opportunity to ask them questions there. So section 2 is section 2 is still just choosing the two models we have for the school year. So that was easy for us. We're going to be traditional or family choice, which family choice is remote. And, we're not gonna have any differences between schools that we know of right now, so we're leaving that blank. And now we're ready for section 3, which talks about standards-based instruction. We're gonna start with, Dr. Miller.
Ms. Parker has a light on.
Oh, sorry.
I have one question. During the meeting that we had with the state official,
Right.
I thought he said that with the number of schools that we have and the different types of schools that we have,
Uh-huh.
that it would be likely that we would have a difference between our schools. So can you kind of elaborate on why that decision was made, that we won't have any differences, even though we've got 20, 30, 24
Yeah.
very
So, I
different
think
models?
as we try to look at how would we support that in terms of the, other logistics, i.e. transportation and meal service, what would the, without knowing, teacher staff for potential having to be remote learners or we're having to accommodate, we were trying to go into this continuous learning plan with something that could work for all schools for now. Not to say that we couldn't, if there a situation came up and we needed to adjust, that we could do that. This plan, it would continue to be a fluid plan. So, I think those are the main things we're saying. We want it to be consistent across the district right now.
So good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to share with both you and our stakeholders. To say that this is a fluid plan, I think is probably an understatement. It's been quite a challenge to come up with the best alternatives for educating our students. And obviously we know that face-to-face instruction with a teacher is the number one best way that we can educate our students, and that is our ultimate goal, to be able to have students in class as much as possible. So I think there's several pages here, and my computer is loading really slowly, Scott, so I'm going to count on you to adjust things. So when you look at the plan, we had to say in each grade band how much time would be allotted for each subject area. In this instance, we went with exactly what we have in our regular school day schedules right now, and you're going to see that carry, at least in K4, you're going to see that carry across all grade bands. I will tell you, when it comes to remote learning, pre-K through second grade is my huge concern. I'm worried about third and fourth grade, but pre-K through second grade is a very big concern to me for being able to meet their needs. So, Scott, is that down now to my plan? Yeah, so in your notebooks, if you look at the MCPS elementary school instruction for VPK through fourth grade, we have set up 3 different plans here. Traditional in-person with blended learning, although we know in K-4 we're not going to be one-to-one right now. We do want our teachers using, this place all the way down at the bottom, almost at the end of the plan there. I'm sorry, I don't have a page number for you on that. Because we currently don't have one-to-one devices in K-4, but we know that there are going to be grants and additional funds becoming available to us. We still want to use blended learning so that in the event, heaven forbid, that we do have to close completely, both teachers and students would be accustomed to using those programs, and hopefully they could move fluidly into using those programs. We would also want to work with training parents so that they could easily access those things as well. But in the second option there in the blue is 100% remote instruction with K-4, pre-K through 4. We are looking at student work packets. We are not looking at using any type of digital software at this time. And let me clarify, I know we have some schools that have a lot of digital devices, but not every school has a lot of digital devices. So when we were writing this plan, we were writing it with the thought of equity across all schools. That's not to say that if there are digital resources out there and the capability exists for schools to use them, that we're saying that they can't use those. But in writing this plan, we were thinking of being equitable, and that's why we're going with student work packets. In addition to the student work packets, we're planning to put together videos with actual teachers that will be posted to locations where students could have access to those, either through YouTube or on internet websites. Or if somebody doesn't have access to internet, then we can hopefully burn them on a CD or on an MP3 device or something like that, so that they could have access to those at home. So that's kind of what our remote plan is. And then when you look at the pivot plan, transitioning from in-person to remote instruction, this would be, we start school, everybody's coming to school, or they opted into the remote learning, and then we hit our trip number on our number of cases, and we have to close schools and everybody has to go to remote. So when we say that yellow column, that's what we're referring there. And I will be very honest with you, in K through 4, it was basically I cut and paste the first two columns into the last column. So it's a fairly lengthy document, I get that, but you will see that it repeats in a lot of instances, except around the amount of time for instruction. So each different subject area has different recommended amounts of time for instruction, so that's what you're going to see reflected here. At the beginning of the year, parents will have to decide, do I want my child to come face-to-face, or do I want to opt in for that remote learning? I do think we'll probably have some kind of contract around that for parents to sign. Again, just because we have to plan how we're going to utilize our teachers to meet the needs of our students. That will be one of the first things that we have to decide there with parents. If you look at the delivery and I'm not going to read this whole plan to you. I'm sure you don't want me to. And I really think that this first page is just purely a lot of information, but I do want to clarify synchronous and asynchronous learning, because I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand. So synchronous learning, as a classroom teacher, I have all my students who are right there in front of me, and we're teaching and learning together at the same time. If I have remote class, and this again I think would apply more to our 512 plan, if I have a remote class and they are logging into the computer at the exact same time that I, as the teacher, am logging in, that would be synchronous learning. If I post a video or an assignment to my website or the student management system gradebook, where we'll be able to have kind of like an LMS, and the students can do that work at the time of their choosing, that would be asynchronous learning. And that could be that we've posted videos and they can watch that at any point in time. So with the elementary kids, if we're posting videos for the students to watch, that would be considered an asynchronous or a video-based schedule. Just, these definitions are very difficult, so I just wanted to kind of give you an understanding of what we're looking at there. The rest of that first page I'm not going to spend too much time on. So my thoughts are, I'll hit ELA, and then again it kind of repeats all the way down through there. We talked about trying to combine this, and this may be one of the things that we do in the next rendition of this plan. Instead of having 13 pages, maybe we can combine it and shrink it down somewhat, because it does repeat. So with ELA, in the voluntary pre-K classrooms, we have the creative curriculum as our primary curriculum, and we will continue to use that curriculum with all of our students, either remote or in person. That's definitely training and talking that we've got to do with our pre-K teachers about how are we going to meet the needs of our students if they can't come to school, because we will have some who won't be there. So we're trying to figure out, with the teachers' input, how do we best meet those needs. And I'm going through the traditional in-person first. If we adopt the ELA textbooks, then obviously that will be our curriculum of choice for K through 4, and that would be the expectation that that curriculum would be utilized to teach our students. That curriculum does have both print and online resources for K through 4. If the ELA is not adopted, then we will continue to use the resources that we've had over the past couple years. They're not, I know it's not perfect, but we've got to use what we've got. So we've got the district created foundational skills, scope and sequence. We would be using that. The Read to Be Ready unit starters, we are asking to purchase Odysseyware as a online resource or curriculum for schools. In the event that we didn't get to purchase the ELA curriculum, then that software does have ELA in it, and so we could also draw from that as a resource for us. In the blended option, or the 100% remote option, same things are applied there. We would have teachers working to put together work packets. This, ideally in K through 4, it would be, I have a classroom of all remote learners that are first graders, and I have one teacher who's working on that curriculum or that teaching, or I have a whole group of second graders and we've got a teacher assigned to that. That may be that it could be within a school, or we might not have enough students within one school to have a first grade remote class, so we may have to look at pulling kids in together from multiple schools in order to do that. That is one of those things that as we get more information about enrollment, that we'll have a better grasp of how we need to handle that. But then those teachers would work together to create videos, and certainly we think if we've got 3 or 4 first grade teachers that are having to teach remotely, that if they could work together collaboratively to create those videos, because we're expecting everybody to follow the pacing guide. So it shouldn't matter which teacher is presenting the video, the content of the lesson should be the same. So those videos would be created to go along with the work packets. My thoughts initially are we give the teachers the first week to create those work packets. We make a plan that the work packets be picked up on Friday, along with posting of the video resources to support the learning. And then the next week, the students have the whole week to complete that work, watch their videos, and when they come in to pick up the next week's packet, they would turn in the previous week's packet. And so that graded material almost becomes our way of taking attendance. In addition to the packets and the videos, if you are a remote teacher, there would be an expectation that you're touching base with your K through 4 students on a weekly basis. Sometimes that may mean there are some kids that you have to contact more than once a week, but we definitely want that weekly interaction at a minimum with our students in a remote learning situation. And again, when you go to the pivot plan, that's a combination of those 2 plans. So I'm not going to read through all that. ELA, and I think I have one thing I'll have to add is the amount of time. Amount of instruction for ELA is 90 minutes. So that would be an expectation for whether you're in school or remote. And again, in remote, it would be the equivalent of a 90-minute. We certainly know that there's going to be challenges to doing work packets and videos that equal to a 90-minute lesson, but that is going to be what we're shooting for there. Is 90 minutes, equivalent of 90 minutes of instruction. In math, again, very much so the same type thing. Ready Math is already purchased for K through 4 for next year, so that will be the text that we would expect to be utilized for instruction. We're purchasing the online component to that, which will give us a diagnostic at the beginning of the year so we can learn exactly where our students are coming into the beginning of the school year with their math instruction. The online component also makes a prescriptive plan for students. So if we're in school face-to-face, or if a student has access to internet and a device, then they could follow that prescriptive plan outside of the classroom as well. So that would be the expectation with math, that we use the iReady. Odysseyware has math instruction, but we would expect that to be only used as a supplemental curriculum. Math instruction, the expectation would be 60 minutes or the equivalent of 60 minutes on a daily basis. Science, we really don't have science curriculum purchased for K through 4 or social studies. And we've tried to incorporate that with the Read to Be Ready. The state has tried to incorporate that with the Read to Be Ready. So that would definitely be how we would try to approach our science and social studies. We've also pretty much so been told by the state that ELA and math is the big concern. Get as much science and social studies as you can, but ELA and math is our primary concern. Odysseyware does provide content in both science and social studies that K through Odyssey Aware is K through 5. It would provide content for K through 5 that could be utilized, both if we had to do remote. I think there's print packets that could be utilized for remote learning if they're needed to supplement for the science and social studies. Science and social studies is 30 to 45 minutes per day. It varies by school, so we just kind of put a range in there on that. Science could also be incorporated, and social studies could be incorporated into ELA, math, and STEM classes. So it may not be a true dedicated science or social studies instructional time that could be pulled into other lessons. Those are the big areas right there. If you flip on through here, we have put in expectations around teaching. If you're an art teacher, if you're a music teacher, a PE, we expect all that learning to continue. And again, we anticipate that we would have teachers who would need to do remote instruction around those things. So we would be looking for the videos to be created and things like that to follow the exact same format of the others. One big exception is those teachers see every student in the school building for the most part on a weekly basis. So we would not be expecting them to contact every student on a weekly basis in the event we had to go remote. That would be more of maybe a teacher contact said, hey, this student's having issues with this, can you reach out to them, to the art, music, PE teacher, or a parent contacts those teachers and says, hey, we need some support, can you reach out to us? If you continue flipping through the plan here, and you get past all the extracurriculars, you will see plans for the district pacing guides, what the approved curriculums are, if there is an online integration component, what that would be. And in the 100% remote, on the online integration, I marked that as NA because, as I said, because we don't have devices for everybody at this point in time, and we were trying to be equitable, we will expect the work packets to be the primary source of learning there. If we get devices as we progress through the year, then we will update the plan and we will make adjustments to that. You can see there all the different assessment options that we'll have to track student learning and kind of monitor their progress. We do AIMSweb 3 times a year every year. iReady Math Diagnostic is done 3 times a year. Odyssey Ware has an assessment at the beginning of the year that we can utilize that will also make that I cannot say that tonight, that prescriptive path for our students. So that would be one that, as an option, we could administer. And then the state is going to be releasing some online assessments for grades 3 and 4. Those will not be available for K through 2, but we will have those options available for grades 3 and 4. As far as unit assessments or benchmark assessments, all of our schools create common CFAs, so that's what we would be expecting to be utilized there, and then that data closely monitored with that. SPED considerations in the work packet plan, if I'm the remote teacher and I have students in my classroom that have IEPs, then I would be expected to make the modifications to the work packets for those students before they are being sent home, as well as to collaborate with a special education teacher to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all those students. And Ms. Ventura has put there's a couple of special ed documents that she's put into the plan as well. ELL, this will be a challenge for us, just simply providing the amount of instruction that we're going to have to provide. And again, this is one that Ms. Ventura may want to address, but we are definitely going to have to monitor this one and see how many students do we have that are going to opt for remote learning and how we can meet the needs of those students there. I'm not going to read response to intervention and remediation for you. I think you can see those. Grading and feedback. As the work packets are turned in, we would expect the teachers to grade those work packets, provide feedback to students, and then give those packets back when the parents come in to pick up the next round of packets so that they kind of have an idea of where progress is. In addition to phone calls, text messages, virtual meetings, any other types of communication that we can have to give feedback on those plans. Ms. Carter has I had to think of a name there. Ms. Carter has a social emotional learning plan that she's got in place. This is a big piece of most elementary classrooms. It's incorporated into daily instruction, and we would expect that that would continue with our SEL instruction there as well. School counselors would be available to meet with students who are having concerns or need some extra support, so that is included, I think, in Ms. Carter's plan. all elementary schools have collaborative planning, so teachers would still have that opportunity to plan together. If I'm the remote classroom first grade teacher, I'm still gonna plan with my grade level, as well as hopefully the other remote teachers across the district to figure out and make sure that we're all on the same page with what our instruction should be looking like. I think that sums all that up very, very rapidly.
Ms. Parker has, her light on, so I know she has a question.
All right.
When do you think we'll get a request for the K through 4 ELA materials?
We're actually gonna talk about that tonight.
Okay. When do you think they'll be in, though? And did that play a factor in what you decided as far as the delaying of school?
Actually, it won't play a factor in the delay of schools, but it will be delayed coming in at this point in time. So we don't know exactly how long that will be. We have tried to put feelers out to the textbook warehouse to say, if we purchase, this is what we're looking at, can you give us an indication? They tell us that they can have it here in a fairly quick amount of time, but their warehouse, I believe, was damaged during the tornadoes in Wilson County, so that is also going to impact us a little bit. We are planning to go ahead and try to provide training at the beginning of the year. We know we'll have to revisit that training on the ELA materials. However, if we get to purchase the ELA materials, we have immediate access to the online resources. So to be able to provide training to the teachers to use that within the classrooms is something that we would look at doing. It may be that it has to be projected onto whiteboards or things like that, but we would definitely be looking to provide that training early on and then revisit that once materials get in. Because realistically, until teachers have a teacher edition in their hand, it's really hard to do training that's adequate for them. So we know that, and that is a concern for us with the ELA adoption.
Well, in planning too. I mean,
Right,
as they're
absolutely.
starting to plan for their first few weeks of school, and they don't have a teacher's edition in their hand, and we already know that we're going to have to be catching up from, I mean, it's concerning. I
Yes,
just
ma'am.
say that.
I understand. And again, all the teacher resources are available online, from the
Yeah.
teacher's edition to all the print materials and things like that. So we could use
So
that
you're
for
sending
planning.
that stuff out to teachers as far as saying you try to look at this in advance as you start to plan for the year? Or?
If we get the purchase, they tell us they can turn those online resources on immediately once they see our PO.
Okay.
So yes, they would have that to be able to begin thinking and working about that. We know the beginning, really and truly, the first couple of weeks is going to be assessment. There's going to be review that has to take place. So hopefully that will help us on the lag time with getting the resources in, but until I can place that, or we can place that order, we really don't know the turnaround on getting those resources in.
Gotcha. I'll just go back to, I mean, you know, I've beat this dead horse a long time, and I'll beat it again tonight, but when we're talking about K through 4 and the responses, we don't have the ELA things that we need. We don't have a science curriculum, and we don't have a social studies curriculum. Like, I got a second grader and a fourth grader. That's concerning to me. And I mean, even if I decided that I want my children to do remote, there's nothing, I mean, there's problems there too. And that's really frustrating. And I know we have budget issues. I get it, but I don't know how we catch up if these kids can't read. I don't know how we make the gains that we need to make on our tests throughout if we can't. And I feel like you said, K through 2, I mean, it's pivotal. If they can't read by the time they graduate second grade, they're going to struggle throughout, and we're going to keep fighting this battle. So I do think it's really important that we figure out how we can get them in school as much as possible.
We completely agree on everything you just said. This has been a concern for us that we needed to get this purchase along the way.
Right.
I know budget is
tight.
It's a holdup for us, and it is tight. But I think in the next part of the meeting, we're actually going to talk about the.
We're going to add that to the agenda.
Let me step in right quick, and
Sure.
obviously we agree. You know, reading is paramount to students, and you know, we've got the cards that we have, and we are really planning through them the best we can. The best thing is once we move forward, as Dr. Miller said, is once we move forward with this adoption, the online piece that they give us, the resources are incredible, and we're going to have to be very flexible about copies, and also training students as well, and I know K2 is a little different, but training students as well with going back to our technology, because if we go remote, they need to be able to pull those resources. I wish I could stand up here and say, hey, we've got those textbooks and we've got these things, and we're just going to move forward, and we'll talk a little bit about the ELA textbooks in the next part, but we do have a plan. I do want you to feel confident that they have worked extremely hard to make sure what do we do in the circumstances that we've got, and so.
I know you guys have a tough cards that you were given. I recognize that, for a host of reasons. I mean, it's unprecedented what you're having to put together in a short amount of time, I would say for sure. The other thing is with the arts curriculum for music. I think we had discussed Quaver before, and I had a music teacher that reached out to ask if we purchased it. I didn't think we did, but I just wanted to verify that.
We did not purchase Quaver. I think Mr. Seal looked at what the cost of Quaver would be. It's quite expensive for us.
Okay.
We'll keep looking for options there, but I do think it was quite costly.
Well, and the reason why I ask is because in my mind, I'm thinking about like kids playing on recorders, and I sat in on the health meeting and talking about air particles going around the room. I don't know that that's what, I don't know how we teach music or teach instruments when we've got particles going around the room, I'll just say that. So I don't know what it looks like. I know, like, not sharing supplies, having your own set of art supplies, essentially, I guess, how that looks in each of the schools. I'm just curious how some of those things are going to be handled. And I've got a couple of school reopening meetings to sit there. I've sat there in one, but it really didn't cover that aspect of it. So I wasn't sure if that's a district or if that's a school decision.
One of the things that we want to assure you guys is we need to be good stewards of the money on this side too. So one of the things that Chris and Tommy and I have talked about is we're going to be doing a technology inventory. We feel like there's a lot of redundant programs out there, so hopefully we can find money in those areas to be able to look at some of these other options. I can't promise you what we'll find, but that was one of the commitments, probably, Tommy, first night we talked about. Yeah, for the week before I got hired. There you go. Is, we have to be good stewards of the money on our side. So I assure you, we are going to start doing a technology inventory, and hopefully, we can find those monies to cover those kind of things.
Okay, moving on. Excuse me, I'm sorry, Mr. Moore.
If I could piggyback on that, I know, for example, it came up earlier about my previous comments about delaying school, and I appreciate you guys talking about being fiscally, good stewards of that. However, to go with what Kristen's saying, I envision that as we get a week or two into this and things start to kind of work themselves out, some things, I fully hope that you guys are prepared to bring to us, if there is a need, especially if it comes to tools that our teachers need, I would hope that that does not get held back simply because things are tight. I would like to know about that as a board member, and if we need to take emergency type actions and make something happen, I think we need to have that on the table. And I know I'm kind of like saying what you're shaking your head because it's obvious, but I want to make sure everybody understands that. And it's not just for you guys. I want to make sure that teachers understand that if they get a week or two into this and they start to realize, hey, there's a big hole here that we can't fill with what we have. They need to be communicating that to their principals, and those principals need to be moving that up the line, and it needs to come to us so we can do what we're supposed to do, which is provide resources. Even if it is tight, and even if we've got to dig and all of us check the couch cushions, because change is in a shortage right now. But I just want to make sure you guys bring that to us as soon as possible. Now, understanding if there are delays and if we have to order materials, it may take a while to get it. I just want to be able to move quickly on that if we can all possible. I think the rest of the board probably agrees with that too.
And it's that you say that, because that's one of the things we've been talking about in central office, is that we're gonna start presenting you with a needs assessment list of those type items. You know, we understand the budget is the budget, but like you said, we may have to check between the cushions, but we will and have planned that we are going to start presenting you with a needs assessment. And we're talking from district all the way down to school level, and making sure you guys are seeing what these schools, teachers specifically are needing.
And now I'll turn it over to Miss Leanne Willie to do the 5 through 12.
Good evening. Thank you very much for allowing us to speak and present our plan to you tonight, and I appreciate your willingness to look at our needs, because they do become evident when you're trying to plan for something like this. Our plan is a little different. I will give Dr. Brown here, our CTE supervisor, and also Miss Luema McWilliams sitting behind me, Miss Carter sitting here. We came together and wrote this plan, and it is very lengthy, and we apologize for that, but we're trying to meet the rubric, the state rubric for grading this plan, so that we can get state approval. So I do want to let you know that all the components that you are seeing in the plan were things that we were trying to address in the state rubric. I'm going to go about this a little differently, because there is a lot of confusion around the 100% remote and the virtual. So let's talk about that virtual plan right now. Let's just make sure that everybody understands what that virtual school for 7th and 8th graders all the way up through 9 through 12. That school was originally formed to bring homeschooled students into Maury County Public Schools that may be able to take an online course through us. It was also designated as a school that might help some of our medically fragile students who may not can function in our buildings. And it's also, if we have students that transfer into Maury County, and Luema used this example the other day. Let's say we have a student that transfers in that has 1 credit of a foreign language that we don't teach. So that school needs to be able to give that child another credit in that foreign language. So if I'm a student at Central and I have, let's say, a Chinese 1 credit and I need a Chinese 2 credit to meet the graduation requirements, I can be a virtual student for that 1 class, but I'm still a Central high school student. So I am taking that online course for the first time. And we have students across our district that have certain circumstances that might be needed. It is an application process, and it was state approved as of July the 1st. So this is brand new. Luema has worked on this plan for at least 2 years. She has visited just about every virtual school or talked with everyone, and I think that you all heard a presentation from her. But I want our parents to understand that this was a process and a school that was approved at the state level. The primary curriculum for the virtual school is Edgenuity. Okay? Students will be working in Edgenuity on the courses that they need. There will be Maury County teachers that will be checking the progress of those students, and that will be there as a resource for those students. Okay, so that's 7 through 12. That is the Virtual Academy of Maury County. Now let's go back and look at the plans for 5 through 8 and 9 through 12. We're a little different than pre-K through 4 because we are 99% confident that we're going to have one-to-one devices for 5 through 8. We're going to have Chromebooks for them, and 9 through 12 would have a laptop. So we do have the capability of our students going 100% remote, and you heard about some of the connectivity issues that some of our families may have, and you heard Mr. Seal talk about some of the hot spots that we may be able to provide for those students. If none of our solutions work, then we would have to resort back to bringing the device to where there is Wi-Fi, downloading some of those assignments so that they could take those home and work on those assignments. So traditional in-person blended learning. Blended learning, for those of you that have been talking about blended learning, is where our teachers are planning lessons that incorporate technology. That may mean I'm standing in front of my students and I say, would you please go into Edgenuity and pull up this assignment? And as a teacher, I've gone in and I have created an assignment in Edgenuity or some other program that I would like for them to access. That is blended learning. So we've got to make that an automatic thing for our teachers and our students. Our teachers need to routinely, and we're asking weekly, incorporating technology into their lesson plans so that it becomes an automatic response for students to be able to log into their device and know where to go to access those assignments. We are hoping to use Synergy, which is part of our system that we already use as our gradebook, as our learning management system. So as a teacher, I can go in and upload documents, I can upload content, I can upload videos into that learning management system, and I'm also going to be training teachers on Google Classroom for 5 through 8, and for high school we'll be using Microsoft Teams. That means that if I have to go remote, I can have face-to-face meetings with my students. I can log in as the teacher, you all could log in as my students, I can see you, you can see me, we can have mini lessons, we can talk, we can share ideas, we can have conversations, and we can break off into small groups if we need to. You all have been experiencing Zoom meetings, and it would be very similar to that. That is some of the capabilities, along with a lot of other capabilities for Google Classroom and Microsoft Teams for high school. So as I'm a teacher and I'm coming back from summer break, I'm trying to wrap my head around what's it going to look like for me in the classroom. So I'm arranging my classroom, I'm looking for social distancing, I'm trying my best to protect my children as much as possible, and I'm also designing lessons for in-person learning with the idea of if I were to have to go remote, how would I tailor my lesson plan to be able to do that very quickly? So we're asking our teachers to do a lot. So that before school opening planning is crucial to help teachers understand how to do that and to give them time to get that process started. We do know that students lost learning as a result of going home early last year. We know that. As Dr. Miller talked about, we have got some State Department assessments that are coming our way. So let's say I'm a 7th grader going into the 8th grade this year, but I missed 4th quarter of the 7th grade. The state is going to make available some assessments for me to take. So I could take last year's 7th grade math assessment. My teacher will have access to that data to know which standards I have missed. So we're going to be doing a lot of assessments that way. Also, Edgenuity, which is available for 6th through 12th graders, also has test prep questions that we can use. So again, if I'm a 10th grader and I should have had Algebra 2 last year, but I missed a quarter of Algebra 2, I could go into the state platform, or I could go into Edgenuity and take an assessment in that, and it would give me a lot of data of where I'm missing some standards. Mr. Hickman mentioned that following our pacing guides is crucial. When we met with, when Dr. Brown and Ms. Carter and Ms. McWilliams and I met with principals and assistant principals from across the district, the principals understood the need for that. They understood that we have got to stick to a pacing guide. And Ms. McWilliams assured us that even in Edgenuity, if I have a student that is learning in Edgenuity, we can chunk the assignments that those children are learning based on the standards. So whether I'm in the classroom or I'm at home learning, I may be in front of my teacher or I may be at home learning through Edgenuity, I'm still learning the same standards. And how we're going to monitor that is at the end of the 9 weeks, we're going to have an assessment that everybody across the district takes. So regardless of where you're in school, we're going to take that common assessment and we're going to be able to see, are our in-class learners mastering at the same rate as our remote learners? And that's going to be crucial for us. And it's gonna be hard. I'm just gonna tell you, it's gonna be a very hard thing to do. But we're gonna look at that data, we're gonna see where we stand, and we're gonna make adjustments where we need to. So let's talk about 100% remote. So when I enroll my child, I've got some difficult decisions to make as a parent. So I need to decide, am I comfortable enough with my child going into a building and learning face-to-face, or am I not? And if the answer is I'm not, then I need to really look at remote learning. It may be a temporary thing, and what we're asking, as you heard earlier, was a commitment for a 9-week period. That is so we as a district can adjust. So when I start out, and we always say in the blue, if I start out in the blue, I have a designated teacher in Murray County who is monitoring what's happening online. And I'm going to have to start out in Odysseyware or Edgenuity. I'm going to have to do that until we see the number of families that are choosing 100% remote. We need to see what grade levels those students are falling into. And then we as a district need to look at our workforce to see how we can maneuver that. So it could be that I have 75 fifth graders across the district that want to learn remote. Well, if that's the case, I may be able to find teachers that are dedicated to remote learning. And I can have them uploading materials, I can have them uploading, and they're responsible for those 75 students. So at the end of the 9 weeks, as a parent, I'm comfortable. I want my child back in the building. So at the end of the 9 weeks, the person who has been monitoring the student remotely will turn that grade in to the school and say this is their final grade for this grading period. They're coming back to you. So then I start out a brand new 9 weeks in person in the building. Now, if I as a parent am not comfortable with my child going back to school at the end of the 9 weeks, then I may opt to keep them out and learn remotely for an additional 9 weeks. As a district, at the end of the semester, we'll evaluate how many students do we have learning remotely versus how many in the building, and what do we need to do to monitor and adjust there. Any questions about that so far?
I've got one. Somebody might have answered it already, but student to teacher ratio, is it different for online? Okay.
No, it is not. We have to adhere to the state mandate there. So if I'm in school, I cannot have over my EIA numbers while I'm in school. If I am shifted to a remote, I have friends that would love that option, to be able to record themselves on video, flip the classroom as we call it. They would have within EIA numbers as well. Yeah, you have to stay within your EIA numbers. Okay. Moving on down the list, Edgenuity does give us a lot of flexibility. So if I have students that are taking AP courses, I believe you talked about the Collegiate Academy at Central, or honors courses, Edgenuity does have AP level courses. Edgenuity also has CTE courses that our students can take. So we feel like we can cover all the students. We want to keep it as normal for the students as we possibly can. So, for example, I'm a Whitthorne student, and I have ELA first period, and I have math second period. Then I would want to stick to that schedule and log in and do ELA for a little while, and then I would want to log in and do math for a little while based on my school schedule. The school of record will set the schedule, and then whoever is monitoring remotely will try their best to match that up. Music was brought up earlier. Edgenuity does not currently have music, but it's supposed to come on board around Christmas time. Also, there is not a PE course in Edgenuity, so we might do a health wellness or a physical fitness type course as closely related as we possibly can. Now remember, Edgenuity is the program that we use for credit recovery. It is also what we use for blended learning in our regular classrooms. It is also what has been state approved for our virtual academy. So we're getting a lot of use out of our Edgenuity. Okay. The pivot plan. As Dr. Miller mentioned before, I'm a teacher in my classroom. The active cases, unfortunately, in Murray County have gone up, or we've got cases within our school and some difficult decisions need to be made about whether we're shutting a particular school or a particular grade level or classroom down. Then we would want our teacher to pivot to online learning. And so our teacher, hopefully, is healthy and able to do this. Then they would be, again, going to Google Classroom or going to Microsoft Teams. Kids would be logging in, seeing their teacher, and that does not mean that the students have to sit behind the computer for 7 hours a day to be an entire day. It may be, I'm signing in because I have ELA first period. I'm signing in with my ELA teacher. They may do a mini lesson with me and say, okay, go write your essay or go read chapters 2 through 5, and they're offline at that point. If the teacher needs to pull a small group together, she can do that or he can do that through small chat rooms on those platforms. Okay. The blue plan, we've had a lot of discussion around the 100% remote. I just want to make sure that we're very clear on that. To start the school year, we do have designated teachers who can monitor them on Edgenuity to begin with. When we see how many students or how many parents want this option, then we as a district can regroup. And there may be a teacher that's face-to-face, like Dr. Miller was explaining, Synchronous Learning at that point, where we're logging in, looking at each other, we're taking attendance, we're doing mini lessons, and then I can make an assignment. You may log off and go do that assignment, but when it comes time for math class, I'm logging back in with another teacher. Again, we're trying to keep it as normal as possible for our students and for our teachers. Anything? Ms. Williams, anything? Okay.
Okay, so I'm not sure if this had been brought up somewhere in the document, because it's, we had talked before about, and I know it says remote instruction. I'm assuming that means the student. Where are the teachers for this?
My ideal world is that my teacher continues to show up to my building. If I'm a principal, I would love for my teacher to show up to the building, because that teacher would have access to all their teaching materials. They would have access to all their resources. And as a principal, I could do walkthroughs to make sure instruction is happening. I could request to be a guest at one of their virtual meetings. So there's a lot of different things that I can do as a building administrator to monitor instruction to make sure that it is happening at the level of rigor that we need.
Okay.
That would be an ideal.
Okay. And I would say as a board member, that was one of my concerns with moving forward, that we make sure that if that's possible, understanding that I know we've had some discussions about employees and some ADA concerns.
Right.
That would be on a case-by-case basis. We would be addressing that, and then we would have protocols in place for how that at-home employment looks in those instances. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
I'm sorry. We also have some checks and balances. As part of our rubric, we had to look at how we are weaving whole child into our plan. And that is where Ms. Carter came in. And we talked about, when we're in person, we can lay eyes on our students, and we're having conversations with them about, did you have a great weekend? How you doing today? Was that homework hard for you last night? Do you need any extra help? So when we're face-to-face, that part is easy. It's when we're remote that it becomes more of a challenge. And so we have ensured that we're going to have a referral form. We already have it, actually, on the district website, a referral form for teachers to refer students if they need to see their school counselor. We also have a form where parents can refer them. We're also developing a form where students can request meetings whether it be virtual, on the phone, with their school counselor as well, because we want to stay connected. Another thing that we've talked about with the Blue, the 100% remote, if I stay on, let's say I start out the year, I have a Murray County school employee teacher who is monitoring my progress, because I'm starting out the year on Edgenuity. I'm still on my teacher of record roster at my building. So let's say I am a Spring Hill Middle School student. I enroll my child at Spring Hill Middle School. They're on that roster, but as a parent, I opt for remote learning. Okay? Now, when we come together and say, okay, we need to pull a teacher for that remote learning, until that happens, that student can log in to the Spring Hill Middle School teacher's LMS and see everything that teacher is doing with the classroom that's sitting in front of her. And they can chat, they can check in, they can see the videos that the teachers are uploading, they can see the assignments that they're giving to their in-person classroom. But my grading would come more from Edgenuity until we can work that out. And again, this is a fluid plan. It's not 100% in stone, because we just don't know how many families would opt for this remote learning.
Wow. Any other questions from board members?
I'm curious why we as a district decided to do Apple, Chromebooks, laptops, Google Classroom, Microsoft Teams. And the reason why I'm asking is because if I have children that cross 3 different grade,
yes,
each elementary, middle, and high school, then as a parent, I've got to educate myself on 3 things.
Yes, we talked about that too, and I'll let Chris talk about that. We do have teachers across the district that have their favorite websites. We do have teachers that have gotten started in some, but as a district, we can't support them all. And if I'm a student at, let's say, Hampshire Unit School, and I'm in middle school, I may see 5 or 6 teachers. And if every teacher used their favorite, then that means as a student, I've got to learn that as well. So
right.
we have had those discussions at that level with me. Now I'm going to let Chris talk about the actual programs.
Yeah, so essentially what Ms. Willie just said is the prime example of why we're wanting all middle schools to be one, all high schools to be other. So ideally, we talked through this back in March or April, even kind of trying to think then what's truly our best option. So it kind of falls back to what do we want them to learn when it comes ready to the workforce. So ideally, 87% of Fortune 500 companies use Microsoft as their Office suite. So getting them used to that in high school before they move on to either college or onto the workforce is kind of what they're going to see. Now, don't get me wrong, Apple's grown a good 10 to 11% in the past 4 years alone, and they are number 2 at another like 11.8%. So in thinking through this, ideally, middle and high, they get to see both. In the digital integration plan that's been shared a couple months ago, it showed that they become Google Suite certified and also Microsoft certified. So it's one of those variety as a slice of life mentalities. I could see from a parent perspective how that could kind of be a learning aspect of different things, but ideally they're really one and the same, just some have a few different tools. Technically speaking, Google is a little easier. I'll wholeheartily admit to that. So that's why we asked to give that back to, or that's why I'm pushing to put that in the middle schools or even younger. Now, obviously, we got Apple on the plan. We don't have enough money for devices there, but there's many of different researchers out there that say that a touch screen for a K through 2 is just easier. I mean, the multiple Lexia. I've shared that. Principal feedback, if they've all told me during that plan when they looked at it, that's absolutely what we need for that younger grade. So that's the answer to Apple, even though that's not where we're at here. So, I mean, that's my answer. It's a matter of getting them to see both of the major suites that they're going to see once they go out into the workforce or into the public.
excuse me, Mr. Moore.
And to go along with that, I guess the LMS, are we moving towards I understand right now we're not. I am a parent that has a middle schooler and a high schooler. So, I have to log in and figure out two different things, different apps that are used by those teachers to contact. Are we moving in a direction where that is more unified across the district, or are we going to still keep it at the splits on the grade levels?
So technically speaking, our SIS, EduPoint, has an LMS built into it. So that's ideally the number one LMS for grades, and because it syncs back to our SIS, it's all there. Now, how they provide that content would be through Classroom and Teams. That's how they communicate. That's how the quick back and forth in the chats, or they post assignments, or give different feedback is quickly through that. So, ideally speaking, we have 2 days in the first 11 planned to train teachers on that EduPoint. There's so many edgies. The EduPoint piece of the LMS.
Okay, and I say that too as a parent. And I know you guys are trying to cram that training for the teacher side in too. Understand that you're going to have to train me. I've got to understand how to access this stuff so that I can help my kids figure out what they need.
All three of them have a parent portal.
Okay.
We've been, since Mr. Hickman's come on, he said, hey, teachers need to maybe set up a website to share those different ideas. But you will only see your students' work during that parent portal.
Okay.
It's just a matter of at that point, which one is easier to look through that the teacher wants to share. So while it sounds like there's a lot going on here, it's nowhere near where we've been before. I mean, we're talking technically 3 LMSs. We've got teachers that's using 18 others that I could go through and name right now. So we're really cutting it down from the other.
As a parent, that's very nice to hear.
So I just throwing it out there.
I hope, but again, keep in mind that third piece, the educating the parent how to help their child get through this, because I feel like I'm pretty tech savvy, but some of these are not the easiest to navigate when it's 8 o'clock at night and your child says, I need to pull this document, or I need to get this information for tomorrow.
Right.
It's a difficult thing to run into.
Right. Thanks.
Okay, where are we now? This is it, or we got one more component?
No, we're about halfway through.
Okay.
So, next is the attendance portal, and I think Mr. Lane can just highlight some of the differences between for him, the attendance part is the same when we're in person, but he may highlight some of the actions that would be in remote learning.
Thank you, Madam Chair and school board members. In your packet, you will have an updated Murray County Public Schools attendance toolkit. It was updated to meet the requirements in the rubric that was asked for by the state, and it also addresses all possible scenarios that we may go through from in-person to remote, and also cover the virtual. The goal is in the rubric is that attendance is taken daily. We still want to strive for 95 because we know when kids are participating, they're learning. So the goal is that we want students participating at 95% of the days during the school year. What that looks like is a little different from K-4 to 512, but basically the toolkit gives the responsibilities for each of for the principal of the school and staff, the teacher, attendance clerks, etc. And so it just kind of outlines what their responsibilities are and how they track attendance on a daily basis, depending on scenario that they're participating in. Any particular questions about the attendance toolkit or taking attendance? Now, the commissioner states that attendance is the delivery of material, the interaction with that material with the student, and giving feedback to the teacher, and the teacher giving feedback to the student. That would align with the K-4. We had to send packets home for remote. They get them on a Friday. They work with the material. Teachers may call them, see if they have issues. They get the packet back. There's a new attendance code for distance learning. It's a new D code. Every kid that's on remote will receive a D unless they have not checked in with the teacher that's monitoring them through remote. They have not participated in class that day. Then there's instructions in the attendance toolkit on how to record that as an absence, as an unexcused absence. The attendance will be taken daily. Sometimes we may have to go back and adjust, especially when we're talking about K-4. But they will have an attendance code every day. All the attendance laws are in effect. So if a student has 5 unexcused absences, they will roll into the tiers of intervention. That's part of the whole child piece, so that the attendance team at the school reaches out to that student, start having interactions with them. It may be that student may be assigned to the school counselor. They will talk with the parent. So we still will track attendance the same as if they were in person, as if they're teaching or learning remotely. Their participation on a daily basis is expected. There's information we will send to parents about how to send, and it's in the attendance toolkit, but we're asking each school to do an attendance letter with expectations, explaining when notes are to be turned in, how notes are to be turned in if you are relearning remotely, because we want to keep, number one, kids engaged and participating. We want them to be counted present. We want them to be counted in our ADM numbers. And if we know if they're not participating, we're losing them. So all of these interventions will kick in with the whole child, and there still will be truancy violations that would take place that parents will be responsible for if their students are not participating, if they signed up for remote learning. Any particular questions? I know we're trying to move through.
Oh, excuse me, Mr. Atkins.
I just got one about I know attendance every day. Let's say if my computer crashes today, I mean, it's still gonna get credit for that attendance for however long it takes for that computer to come back online, or they're gonna be able to, like 3 days later, if we get a computer getting fixed, or are they still gonna get full credit for that?
Yes.
Can I be held against them as long as they go back and make up the work?
That is correct.
Okay.
And it's up to the parent to communicate that to the school.
Right, yeah.
Because then we can do packets, we can do phone calls that are remote phone calls. That's still remote learning. So there's still material that they could still be working with, that they could receive. We just need that interaction. And that's part of that 5 day of training, not just for the teachers, but we are really got to let parents know what the expectations are and how we communicate with one another. So we really hope that we can get those 5 days approved or whatnot, because it's not just for the teachers, it's for the students and for the parents as well. Any other particular questions? Everything in the toolkit meets or exceeds 3 or 4 on the rubric as far as expectations by the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Okay, next.
It's me, right?
So, I've got part 5.1. Technically speaking, in the back of, I think I'm actually maybe attachment number 2 in the back of your document. It's just a one-pager. We're not truly reinventing the wheel here. We're actually trying to make it a little more streamlined. We have about 5 to 7 documents for technology usage and agreement that the rubric and the toolkit has asked us to reevaluate. That's all there. As far as going back to Mr. Atkinson, your question just now, actually, it comes troubleshooting technical assistant as part of that rubric. Ideally, and we do think we'll be able to get there, we'll have 1 or 2 hot swappable devices. to where they could bring those in. We've talked through different numbers, Tommy and I, about percentages of students that are remote learning on taking, maybe changing some technology specialist hours for after hours type work for a, parent that might not get home until after, regular work hours or so on a rotating basis, that's in there. As far as, updating and security, I mean, it's all really the same, documentation that we've been using. So ideally though, going back to one of the very first questions that kind of come towards me was the reason why we want to be able to put a device in those kids' hands instead of them possibly using their own is because one of our biggest pushes right now is ClassLink, single sign-on, easier for parents. They click on a link, it logs them in, there they are. You're not having to worry about 800 passwords, right? That requires an extension to be installed. So then that's a whole nother piece that might cause a problem on a personal device getting that installed. And that's just one example of many different software pieces that we could use. So, but all that's explained in there. We've talked through Edgenuity, we've talked to, OdysseyWare and all that. That's actually coming up here in a few minutes on what that looks like with CARES Act funding. But going back, asking for tools, asking for that money to get K4. If you want to throw that out there, it's $1.1 million to add devices for every kid K4. That is not obviously taking into effect any devices that we have now, but that would be that number to add on top of that. So we do know about a grant that's been provided. I spoke of about $50 million last week. That's a 2-to-1 match program. So every 2 devices that we've purchased since March, they could give us up to $200 for technically it's every 3 devices. So really 2, and they're paying for 1, I guess is how they're kind of looking at that. So really the only devices that will fall into that for us are the teacher devices that we purchased, the 307. So it's only really about $26,000, but that can be used for a few more devices or even more hotspots. So that's something we plan to look at a little bit more this week since it was just kind of released at the end of last week. So other than that, I'll take any questions. The rest of it is all pretty self-explanatory, I think, in my attachment.
Seeing no questions, thank you very much.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me the time to go over our professional development plan for the beginning of the year. We actually went back and looked at needs assessment data that we collected from our teachers in January about what their needs were, and instructional technology was the highest area of need. We also had a group of teachers that were working with Lipscomb back in the spring cohort, and part of their project was to do action research, and they were all working on things that impacted their classroom, but when we had to go home and they wanted to continue learning as a group, they decided their action research would be based on teachers' perceptions on their ability to deliver online instruction. And so when teachers returned in May for that week, we surveyed them, and 267 responded to that survey, and it was kind of an average efficacy of how they felt they could deliver. So again, we see the need that teachers have to be able to teach in the event that we have to go remotely. Our current calendar this year was approved with Teacher Prep Day on day 1, and that was in response to teachers' feedback from previous years because open houses were occurring that very first week, and so they wanted that time on the front end. In the current situation, we felt like that was not going to be a good fit for teachers to come back the first day after being at home for so long and principals not being able to address their faculty as a whole and share that school level plan. I did work with principals and teachers to gather feedback, so in attachment 3 you will see that we are proposing that the first morning, that first 3-hour block, will be teachers in their buildings learning the plans, having that time to come together, reestablish the culture for the year, having time to walk through their classrooms once they see the plan and understand what it's supposed to look like in their individual classrooms. They can do walkthroughs, figure out what needs to happen, and then the second half of the day will be one half of their teacher prep day. So we're actually splitting, they're still getting the equivalent of 6 hours of teacher prep, but we have split it into two different days. Teacher prep is not just prepping of the classroom. That is them having time that principals cannot have meetings. That is protected time for them according to the MOU. They can work on the physical space of their classroom, but they also can work on lesson plans. So that is all outlined in there. Then we took approach just like a teacher does in the classroom, an instructional strategy. The teacher is the I do, then they do things with their students, the we do, and then they let the kids practice or apply and you do. So all of our training days, we have taken that same approach. We will train them in a specific area. They will have time to practice it with support of tech ambassadors, central office staff, teacher leaders, whomever for the appropriate sections. And then the teachers have time to apply it. So as you see on day 2, part of that day is in the new Synergy gradebook, the LMS. So after they learn how to use it, then they have time to go back and either upload material that they have already created on their own, or they have time to search for videos or things they want to embed, or they can plan actual lessons. The teachers that I talked with really liked that because we talked about in the event that we have to go remote. I talked with a middle school PE teacher, middle school band teacher. Specifically, we talked about how they can work together because there's days built in where they can, during those times, they can get on Microsoft Teams or Google Meet and collaborate. So if they know what PE is going to have to look like when they go remote, they can already start building out those lessons, videos, anything that they need. We also understand the importance that schools have their own training needs, professional learning needs based on their needs assessment. So we've built time in for that. We've also included our required PDs that the state expects us to complete. We would much rather get them done on the front end so that teachers can have that put to bed per se and not have to worry about that. The other part of this is not only do we have to train instructionally, we also have to prepare our teachers for the health and safety component of returning to school. So that is what we really looked at for the second week, if you do allow us to delay the start for 1 week. Still continue school level training, still going back to some of those key points that we have to make sure they are comfortable and confident in being able to teach remotely. But we also have to know that they have to be prepared for day 1. We kept that professional development or admin day between start of day 1 and day 2 for students because we know that they're going to be practicing on the front end. They're going to be going through different scenarios, having think tank sessions, but it gets real on day 1. When you have 300 students, 1,000 students, 1,400 students come into your building, that's when the rubber meets the road. And principals and teachers are going to have time to reflect and adjust for the second day. So it may be that half of our schools, arrival works perfectly. They feel good and dismissal unravels because if my mom's in line picking up my youngest at Baker and they have a limited amount of cars they can get on the school property and twice as many parents show up for car rider the first day, where do those cars go? Hampshire Pike is not the place that they need to be. So that in-between day, that buffer day, gives them that time to say, okay, we've got to look at our dismissal process. So I'm not going to read to you every day, but I think you've had time to look at that to see we've been methodical about how we wanted to lay those trainings out to give teachers support. You also know that we've been doing the MAP Academy, or MAP sessions of PD for teachers after hours. Those have been held at Central, and we've had childcare provided the last few years. We can't do that on the front end, so we're already preparing how does PD look on an ongoing basis. And for the teachers that continued PD with us over the summer, we know that Microsoft Teams is an easy way to do it. They use Zoom this summer. But we will have forums, we will have, tune in at 7 on Thursdays for support in maybe it's the iReady math component, or if it's the ELA, if we purchase the materials, then they can have, maybe they know that Thursdays at 7, Tuesdays at 4, we give them multiple times where they can join to discuss problems of practice, lesson plan design, things that they're not unsure, they're unsure about and they want to get that support. So that'll be the nice thing, is we can have PD offered in a variety of formats and not just once a month or twice a month at Central. It can be on a weekly basis. If you have any questions, just let me know.
Thank you. Anyone, questions? Okay. Okay, of course. No, excuse me. Okay.
Okay. Real quick, it's kind of two parts of the question. I know you said you had support. I want to make sure that teachers feel like, especially as we get into a possible remote or remote learning situation. Let's just say I'm a teacher, I get there, and I feel overwhelmed with making this transition. Do we have a solid support structure in place to address that? To make sure that I, as a teacher, can feel comfortable to reach out to someone in my building or someone at the district level to let them know, hey, I need tools, I need resources, I am overwhelmed with this.
I think we'll have like an army of support. We have some teachers that we call tech ambassadors who actually went through 2 different college level courses. Some of us I went through one. I think Scott's been through both of them. Dr. Miller's been through 1 or 2 of them. And so we have that group who can help assist. Then we also have a lot of teachers who, just because they wanted to, they kept teaching. And they set up mini classrooms in their homes. I know someone that had like the reading corner and the cozy lamp and everything, and was teaching their heart out until June. So we will pull those people.
Okay.
That's why we have differentiated pay for teacher leaders, and we will utilize them, almost revamping the mentoring program, but for remote instruction. So,
and I guess 2 pieces of that. One is having it. The other is making sure that teachers are aware they can reach out. Because I guess, again, I'm putting myself in those shoes. If I were a teacher, it's one thing for the district to have those resources, but for the district to make sure that they are communicating that openly, that it is not an issue. If you're struggling with this, please reach out. Make sure that's a comfortable and an inviting type situation, I guess, is where I'm looking for.
There's actually been ideas thrown about this week to revamp the diploma.cool website to add those resources for both parents, students, and staff as well. What we're going to call it, I'm not sure. We've been through that with the old committee and stuff or whatever, but that's kind of an idea point. And then as far as the big change over to Google, they got approved last Monday, the mobile mind training. Everybody loves badges, so it's a bunch of micro-credential training when it comes to Google, and that's self-paced whenever they want to do it type thing as well. So we're trying to find all kinds of different avenues.
All right. So I guess second piece to that question is, as a teacher goes through this, we start to perhaps, as they see deficiencies in the work that's being put out. Do we have a process in place to try to make sure that we can keep that teacher on track? I know, and I say that I know there's normal processes in a normal classroom, but I would imagine that in this, we really kind of have to accelerate some of these things, because I can see some major risk in going 2 9-week periods without really getting some good feedback that the online learning portion or the remote learning is just not it's not an effective system that's going on there. Do you guys have a plan in place to quickly address that and make sure? My concern there is twofold. One, it's the employee, obviously. We have some obligations as an employer to make sure that we are giving that teacher the tools they need. but also understanding that this is quickly changing. We already have some issues from last spring. We really can't afford to go too long by having a child that's just not getting a good education. So I guess, are you guys kind of have a strategy for addressing both of those?
So on one of the days, we will go over, the schools will go over those expectations. So that was one of the things we heard very loud and clear in previous meetings with some of you all, is that we can't go into the unknown without having clear expectations. So there will be expectations from our level to the principal level to the teacher level, and I'm sure it'll get down to all other employee types. So that will be part of that PD time. And then I'm gonna let Scott talk about, there is an accountability piece and monitoring of this plan that we have to address with that as well.
So not only is the principals look at, participating in lessons and those things like that, we'll have to look at that too. So if we see percentages that don't look like they're supposed to, then we will reach out to the principal to see what the issue is. Also, our team rubric is going to present a remote model, if you would, so that we will be able still conduct observations through that. Keep in mind, we want to be a help, and because we want everybody to be successful, because we know if teachers are successful, our students can be successful. So that will be our first effort. We're going to, monitor that where we have places where we don't think something's going on, or there's low attendance, or there's a failure to get attendance, that we will go out and provide help first to see what's going on, and then continue to support to, make sure we get up to expectation if it's not at expectation.
Mr. Howe?
So I know traditionally we have set aside a day for teachers to set up rooms, and I know that some teachers take more than one day to set up a room. So I understand that we just have a little bit of time here. I mean, if I'm looking at this, I'm guessing it's like an hour or two for them to walk through and set up time, or, I mean, how is this? It's not a dedicated day, it's just a little bit of time in a morning session, looks like.
So the MOU requires that we allow teachers to have 6 hours of teacher prep time that cannot be disturbed. So if you'll see on 7/27,
Right.
after they know what the classroom and the school plan is, they'll have those 3 hours. And then on that Friday, they will have the last 3 hours on the 31st to finish up that last 3. And that was our plan when we were going to be starting back on August 3rd. So we kept that, and we can survey teachers to see how they liked it, but the ones I talked to liked having that, here's what's at the first, I'm working on it, then I'm working on these different PDs, and then I have time at the end of the week. The other thing too is they will be in their classroom in parts of these working on the apply part that we talked about. So as they're training, we're not expecting them to sit in the library the entire time to plan their lessons, because we want them to be comfortable, and their classroom is typically their most comfortable spot. So it could be that in that time, if they get what they need to do for that day, then there's some flexibility that they could work, at the end of those days as well.
Okay.
Can I have a quick comment on that
Sure.
too? We already know that we're gonna have to relook at the calendar anyway, because during this meeting, right before this meeting, we got sent email from the state. So one of the things we are gonna look at that. I think the MOU is 1 full day, so we'll have to make sure we put that in there, because I believe that would be a 7.5 hours. So we know, and he's gonna talk about a little bit anyway when we talk about the calendar. We know we're gonna have to look at some different things there.
And so my second thing was, we are gonna talk about the calendar, because that's what okay, then I'll wait.
We're almost there. I
have a quick question.
Sorry.
The days, the morning session, afternoon session, how long are those sessions?
We have to have 6 hours of PD a day, so they'll go 8 to 11, have their hour-and-a-half lunch, and then come back. Typically, we do 12:30 to 3:30 for the afternoon session. So they're not going to be stuck in.
Well, that's what I was going to get at. I mean, if I'm going to be voting for extra PD days, I work a 9-hour day every day. why are we only providing 6 hours of instruction when we can give maybe 2 more hours?
Are you teacher PD, teacher
Yes.
workday?
Sure, I mean, you're asking for more days, but yet you're only giving 6 hours of materials a day. Can we not use more hours to get more materials to them, or?
That is our contractual day. Teachers get 6 hours of PD, and they work a 7.5-hour day. Jen, do you wanna?
Actually, the 7.5 day is an extended day in order to stockpile days, so.
I would just say that when you're learning new stuff, just like kids, we wouldn't expect them to sit and learn all that for 4 or 5 hours a day. It's a lot to take in and digest. I don't know really the legalities of the 6-hour versus the 7.5-hour day, but I do know that we have to have lunch. Typically, you would have to have breaks, and I think that's you combine the lunch and the breaks into the hour and a half. I think that's kind of how that works, because we're not private employees.
Well, I mean, we get 30 minutes for lunch. I mean, we're given an hour and a half for lunch, 6 hours of material. Teachers were off for 3 months and still got paid. I have a little bit of a problem with that. I'm just being very transparent and honest.
Once again, that's one of the things we'd have to discuss with, because of the MOU, with the contractual kind of things we have with them. And she said it rightfully. We've been sitting here 3 hours, and I see how some of you feel. They're gonna be sitting 6 hours. So, I do hear what you're saying, Mr. Sims, I really do, but we have to navigate the MOU and make sure we're abiding by it. And
Okay.
state law.
And state law, right.
Correct.
I know, you know.
Can I ask Mr. Wolver what his thoughts is on that?
I think you're contractually bound. I don't think you can go beyond that. I'll be glad to look at it. I've never looked into how many hours could you actually ask a teacher to work in a given day, but I've got an idea you're gonna be hung there.
Okay, moving on. And I know that everybody is a 3-hour meeting and all, and we do have another meeting after this. It's important because we've got to vote on ordering those funds, so stay with me here. I will give us a break here in a minute.
So Section 7 is implementation and monitoring. We purposely haven't put all the artifacts in there that we need because we were waiting on guidance from you guys to say, hey, this is we're going ahead with this plan. Just to think about, you've already heard about when we monitor, of course, we're going to look at assessments, quarterly assessments, how we're doing. If you think about from the technology part, we talked about device count. We talked about number of I'm trying to think about number of connections we made with the actual issuing devices, getting devices out to students. We talked about with teachers the monitoring protocols that we're going to have so far as changing the team protocol to the looking at blended learning, changing the team observation matrix. We're talking about things we already know integrated in our diploma, in our technology plan, like the TIM matrix, looking at, how does that look different now in the classroom? So all of those instruments will be loaded, things that we can start to look at. Also, there are a number of, of course, we got to monitor our employees, our number of substitutes, number of substitutes available, number of bus drivers available. All of those little triggers that we're going to have to think about in terms of as we come to you and say, hey, we need to make a change. Hopefully that, our intent is to be based on data and not how we feel. We're going to, say, hey, here's what the data says. And we know quarterly, you know, we intend to bring to you, here's how we're doing on these results. And, you know, if we have those instruments where we can do those quarterly results, then we'll bring those to you. And then, so that way you'll know how we're doing and what the efforts are we're making. And so I'll be followed Jack. I think his is, he's already explained a lot, but he has section 8. I'm sorry, there are no questions. I didn't want to rush. Yeah.
Hello, again. So we made it to section 8. That's a good thing, 'cause I think it's the last section in this document. Woohoo. Communications. I touched on some of the stuff earlier when David had a question. The surveys have been really, really helpful, to gather data. The parent survey was fantastic, 6,644, responses, as of right now. So we did the surveys to the teachers and parents. We shared with the school board, you guys, principals and teachers, the data, and then we made it public. We're having the school board meetings, and then we will use all of our resources available, like I mentioned earlier, which is school messenger, all calls, limited number there, Mr. Fulbright, so we don't get you inundated with too many. And we'll also utilize the local media and any avenue we can. Recently, the parent survey I sent to a bunch of our stakeholders, which means community partners. That's, I believe, how we've got this great response rate. 6,644 responses is the best I've seen since I've worked here. That's a great response rate for a survey. Do you have any questions?
Seeing no lights, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
So, Ms. Kinzer, we owe you to send you out, we didn't attach the rubric in your plan, and we will get that emailed out to you so you can have that rubric to look at,
Well,
to see.
honestly, I've been thumbing through this looking and thinking maybe I'm just glazed over. So, you know, is anything?
I just wanted to close on the CLP process. Please, when you're looking over the CLP, do not get it confused with our reopening plan, although some of it goes hand in hand. When we ask you guys to vote on the CLP for July 20th, we're talking just about sections 1 through 8, okay? I want to make that clear because I don't want people to think that when I'm asking you guys to vote on the reopening plan. Obviously, we are still a few weeks out from reopening, and so much can change between now and then. And we're about to bring forth the calendar, and Mr. Gaines is going to present that. But I also don't want that, part of that goes hand in hand, but that part is not what's needed to be turned in to the state on July 24th, just sections 1 through 8. And as Mr. Gaines said, each one of these sections does have a rubric, and we are so sorry that we did not include those. We will send those to you, because even after we agree upon the CLP, it has to pass the muster, if you want to say, with the state, and they can send it back and reject it. We may not know until mid-August if they accept it or reject it. If it's rejected, we have to go back in and we have to do whatever they say we need to do. So I just want to be very clear about that on the CLP. It's not, we're done. It's, we give it to them and then they'll let us know. Is there any questions on the overall CLP before we get into the calendar? And the calendar, it's not a lot to say about it. It is what it is.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank all of you all. I'm very impressed at how you've put this together, and it's very professional. All the questions that I've had pretty much answered, and I know you're on top of it, and I really appreciate that. And we're going to hear about the calendar, and then we'll adjourn this meeting for just a few minutes for everybody, give everybody a break, and then no board members can leave because we've got to vote on some important things. Purchases and things that we need, ELA is being one of them, at a short board meeting after this meeting. So I say that before anybody gets too excited about adjournment here. So, Mr. Gaines.
So basically, in the calendar, we didn't change like the, fall break or anything like that. We tried to keep the calendar the same. What we went in and did was try to take away the, some of our PD days that were already planned and make those instructional days, because we're missing those instructional days during the year. So if you can, I think somebody suggested that we add both calendars, so that was a good idea, so you could see the difference between, both calendars. You can see on, we had a PD day planned for, September, 8th, for example. It's now a school day. And the same thing for, November 3rd, we kept, because that's election day and we have to keep it. But we are planning to, we're still planning to bring teachers and do professional development. We just couldn't have students there. Same thing with, the major changes there. We had a admin day on the 4th. It's now an instructional day. We had, March 11th was a PD day. It's now a, teacher day. And then we adjusted the end of the calendar to add one more day and make the, if you look at the May 25th, it's right now it's an early dismissal day. It can, I know we had some feelings about early dismissals in the past. It can be a whole day, but right now it's our early dismissal day.
Okay. Okay. Are there any questions about it? And I understand that you may be looking at it this week in light of the discussion tonight.
We received some emails from the State Department about adding a discretionary day, so we will have to add that discretionary day somewhere, 'cause that's what they said they needed. So, but we thought if we're gonna get the calendar approved, we'd add it then and then have, go ahead and send it all in at the same time.
All right, sounds good. So we actually won't vote on this until next week at the call special, and, if you have any revisions to it prior to that, you'll just send it to us by.
Yes, I intend to, we'll add that discretionary day and send it.
Any questions or comments? No, nothing, okay. You weren't here when I said,
Oh, was I not allowed to talk while I was in here?
no, nobody asked questions.
Really quick question on this. Was there, and again, I understand was there parent input on these changes?
Right, we intended for this period to get parent input because, we tried to look at the sense of timing to try to get something to you guys that you could look at to say, hey, this is how we're intending to get these 5 days. And then we tried to consider if someone did have a fall break planned or something like that, that we did not want to mess with any of those days. And we tried to leave our, the days that were already there, except of course, the 4th was teachers were coming back anyway, it just wouldn't be parents, but that would be a day where it would actually be a student day, so.
So the expectation is that parents would take this next week as we look at it, for them to look at this and make sure this is a
and so I hope that they would give us feedback on that feedback form too, to talk about it. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Part of the reason on that, waiting to present it, then have the parent feedback, is when it's not, we don't have to have it, literally, if you guys decide we don't want to vote it on 20th, it's one of those matters we don't. And then the other thing I want to point out, we try to stay away from using the discretionary days, but if we have to go into add, because with murder hornets, COVID, I can only assume what kind of winter we're going to have. So if we go over our discretionary days, we'll be adding school days either through breaks or at the end of the year.
Okay, then this takes care of this meeting, and let's take I'll say 10, if I say 5, it'll be 10. So I'll see you back here in 10 minutes. Stand up, stretch, you can do it. No, 10 minutes, not 15. It's a 5-minute break. I am really sorry to do this, but I've got board members want to get going here. So I'm going to call the meeting to order. It's a call special. Present are all board members with one absent. I don't even have my computer to it as we speak, but we need to adopt the agenda. Motion to adopt by Mr. Atkinson, seconded by Mr. Howell. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Okay. On the agenda is purchases for the CARES Act. I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve all.
Okay, I don't even have this pulled up to see.
I'll be for 1 through, oh, I guess we still. The motion to approve agenda.
No. Excuse me. The reason, Shirley, I don't even have up the right thing here, so. Is.
I voted. I did too.
Okay, let me get on the right meeting here. Yeah, that's what I did too. All right, we've adopted the agenda. And the first item then, and only item, let me vote here first here, there you go, is.
Mr. Atkinson, is your motion to approve?
4.1 through 4.5, I think, 4.5, yes. Motion to approve 4.1 through 4.5.
Who seconded that motion? Ms. Morency seconded the motion. Is there any discussion? Mr. Moore.
I just want to, since we should probably go through just a minute of this. These are all items that are being requested to address the CARES Act plan that we've put into place, correct?
That is correct. Everything we've already talked about in the CARES Act budget that was presented to you that you approved the budget some time ago, so now we're intending to make those purchases. And those purchases will help us implement, assist us in reopening and help us with the continuous learning plan.
So I had an additional question for that too. Is there any expectation that there may be additional funds later, or do we think this is pretty much all we're gonna get on this?
Well, of course, there'll be hotspots that we'll come back to you for. There is money in there for example, additional janitorial cleaning supplies. Trying to think of what else is left. I anticipate right now, just on the side note, if a private school makes a purchase that's more than $10,000, we will probably have to bring it to you just to keep everything within the same thing because I've been told that we would probably be doing their purchases because we're actually providing equitable services for them.
Okay.
So
those are being funneled through us?
Yes.
For private schools within this county?
It would be Zion and Columbia Academy are the
Okay.
ones that elected to participate.
But I guess my question was more to the, I know there was a $2.2 million was the total, is that correct, or am I?
Yes.
Remembering? And then there was some reduction based on potential purchases by private schools in the county.
Yes.
My question was, is there any expectation that $2.2 million may change at some point?
No, that the private schools still have their amount of money, which is about
So we're still about the same numbers?
Yeah, about 1.9 is where we are.
Thank you.
Yes.
Were any of these put out? Thank you. Were any of these put out for competitive bid, or did we use what's it called, buy board?
All of those were used, the buy board or for our computers, Edgenuity. We already purchased. I had Edgenuity. It's an add-on. The same thing with iReady Math. We already purchased the math component. We're just adding on the online module. The attendance is an add-on to Synergy that we already have. The only things that were part of the buy board would be the laptops. And Mr. Steele can talk about if you need him to we were able to get some significant discounts and those things like that, and we followed the buy board contracts as we that's what we tried to do.
Yeah, I have a problem with those. So are we sure with certainty that these are the lowest prices we could get for these, items?
On the Dell models, absolutely. We actually placed that order cautiously. When speaking with Doug and Shifra, one day, we worked through a way to go ahead and put us in line for those. We can cancel that if you guys don't approve that tonight, but that $197 is absolutely the cheapest. The other prices are on the technology toolkit that the state's provided to us. Those are actually listed at the bottom of that as recommended devices. Based off every other model that we've looked at, we've got, Lenovo, we've got Samsung, we've got all of them that I've got quotes on. This is essentially the same price as those others. We also took into consideration the amount of time it would take for them to get here. All of these, per promises given to me, so this is me going on record saying it that way, technically all of them will be here by September the 7th. Now, obviously, we know how some of that plays and how that correlates, but if we would have purchased any more than those 1,700s promised by Dell, it was like November on those dates. So that was taken into consideration as well.
All right, thanks.
Any other discussion? Who's got a light on? Oh, Ms. Parker, excuse me.
Sorry. So does this include ELA? From what I saw, I thought I just saw license for the online license.
The explanation about the ELA is that I thought I could add that to the agenda, but because it's a call special, I can't.
Gotcha.
So it will be added to the call special next week,
Okay.
and we'll take action on it.
Okay. So this is just for online license, though, for some of the ELA?
This will be essentially for the math. When you're talking about those online already, it's for math.
Okay.
And then of course, we've got the supplemental Odyssey where that will cover all subjects in K4 that we needed to support the blended learning component. So that's what Odyssey is, the purchase that we're buying for that.
Okay.
And like she said, we'll have to come back to you with a recommendation on the textbooks.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Then we're ready to vote. Excuse me, we're ready to vote.
So the motion recommend to approve all purchase requests funded with CARES Act funds, is that correct?
Is that correct?
Should. 4.1, 4.2. Yeah, it should be just, items 4.1 through 4.5.
As presented.
Yeah, as presented, yeah.
4.1, 4.2, 4.3, 4.4, and 4.5 through, I see, okay, is that, we don't need to define each one, or just through 4.1?
That's sufficient.
Okay. All right, then we're ready to vote. That motion does pass. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Second, all those in favor say aye. All right, y'all didn't sign a second page here, so before you leave, you have to do that. Sign everybody.